My son looked me in the eye and said my place was in the trash as he kicked me out into the unforgiving Chicago winter. He thought he had won. He thought he had taken my house and left me with nothing but the clothes on my back. But he forgot one thing. He forgot that I was the one who built the empire he was so desperate to steal. By the time he realized his mistake, I had already left with $10 million of his inheritance. Before I tell you how I destroyed his greed, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to teach an ungrateful child a lesson. The black plastic garbage bag hit the snow with a dull thud that sounded sickeningly like a body falling. I stood on the porch, the biting February wind cutting through my thin cardigan, staring at the bag. It contained 40 years of my life. My clothes, my photos, the few books I kept by my bedside. All of it reduced to a single heap of refuse on the frozen pavement. Vanessa stood in the doorway, her arms crossed over her chest, a look of pure, unadulterated triumph plastered across her face. She did not look like a daughter-in-law. She looked like a predator that had finally taken down its prey. "Get going, old man," she spat, her voice sharp enough to slice through the cold air. "I told you this weeks ago. I need this room for my yoga studio. Your energy is too stagnant. It is ruining my feng shui." I slowly lifted my gaze from the bag to my son. Bradley stood behind her, his eyes fixed on his expensive Italian leather shoes, unable to meet my stare. He was 38 years old, a man I had raised to be honorable, to be strong. But as he stood there, shivering slightly, not from the cold, but from cowardice, I saw a stranger. "Bradley," I said, my voice calm, despite the storm raging in my chest. "Are you going to let her do this? This is my house. I built this house with your mother before you were even born." Bradley finally looked up. His face was a mask of weak defiance, the kind of look a child gives when they are caught doing something wrong, but refuse to apologize. "It is not your house anymore, Dad," he mumbled, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "And honestly, Vanessa is right. You are taking up too much space. You do not contribute anything. You just sit in that armchair and stare at the wall." It is depressing. The words hit me harder than the freezing wind. I did not contribute. I, who had quietly paid off his credit card debt 3 times in the last 5 years without him knowing. I, who had pretended to live on a meager pension just to see if he would step up and take care of his father. Vanessa stepped forward, her patience evaporating. She grabbed my arm, her manicured nails digging into my skin through the fabric of my sweater. "We are done talking," she hissed. "Get out and give me that watch. You do not need a Patek Philippe to count down the hours until you die in a shelter." She reached for my left wrist. It was my Patek Philippe Calatrava, a vintage piece my late wife Catherine had given me on our 25th anniversary. It was the only thing of value I visibly wore. I instinctively pulled my arm back. "Do not touch me," I warned, a low growl escaping my throat. Vanessa laughed, a cruel, high-pitched sound. She shoved me. It was not a hard shove, but the porch was icy. My heel slipped. I felt gravity take hold, and for a split second I saw the gray Chicago sky spin above me before I landed hard on the concrete steps. Pain shot through my hip, white and hot. My glasses skittered across the ice. Bradley gasped, taking a half step forward, his instinct to help warring with his fear of his wife. "Stay there, Brad," Vanessa commanded, not even looking at him. "He is fine. He is just being dramatic." I lay there for a moment, the cold seeping into my bones. I tasted blood where I had bitten my lip. I did not cry. I did not moan. I simply adjusted my vision, blurring slightly without my glasses, and looked at them. I etched this image into my mind. My son, the coward. My daughter-in-law, the tyrant. Standing in the warmth of the home I paid for, looking down at me as if I were a piece of roadkill. I slowly pushed myself up. My hips screamed in protest, but I forced my legs to hold my weight out. I picked up my glasses, one lens cracked, and put them back on. The world came back into focus, sharper and uglier than before. "You are going to regret this," I said softly. Vanessa rolled her eyes. "The only thing I regret is not doing this 6 months ago. You have 10 minutes to get that heap of junk truck of yours off my driveway before I call the cops and tell them a senile old vagrant is trespassing." She slammed the heavy oak door. The sound echoed like a gunshot, signaling the end of my life as a father and the beginning of my life as a judge. I limped down the steps to the black garbage bag. I dragged it through the snow to my rusted 1998 Ford F-150. I threw it in the truck bed. My hands were shaking not from the cold, but from a cold, crystalline rage that was settling in my gut. I walked back to the driver's side door, but before I got in, the front door opened again. It was Bradley. He came out not to help, but to hand me an envelope. "Here," he said, his breath visible in the freezing air. He thrust a crumpled envelope toward me. I did not take it. He dropped it on the hood of the truck. "What is this?" I asked. "A list of shelters," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "And $100. It is more than you deserve after the way you have leached off us." Leached. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. I looked at him, really looked at him. "Bradley," I said, "you do realize the deed to this house is in my name. You cannot just kick me out." Bradley let out a short, humorless laugh. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded document. He held it up, but he did not let me touch it. "You really are losing it, aren't you, Dad? You signed the deed over to me 3 years ago. Remember, when you had that pneumonia scare, you wanted to avoid the estate tax. You said, and I quote, 'Everything I have is yours, son.' I remembered. I remembered lying in that hospital bed, tubes in my arm, thinking I was taking my last breaths. I remembered seeing Bradley crying by my bedside. I remembered signing the papers because I trusted him. I wanted to make sure he was secure. I wanted to protect him from the government taking a cut of his inheritance. I had handed him the weapon he was now using to execute me. So that is it, I said. You were just waiting for the right moment. It is my house, Leo, he said, using my first name for the first time in his life. And Vanessa wants you gone. So you are gone. He turned his back on me and walked back inside. The lock clicked. Then the deadbolt slid into place. I stood alone in the driveway. The wind howled, whipping snow against my face. I looked at the house. It looked warm and inviting from the outside, the golden light spilling from the windows. Inside, they were probably already celebrating. They probably thought the old man would drive to a motel, spend the $100, and then fade away into the system of state-run nursing homes. I climbed into the truck. The engine coughed and sputtered before roaring to life with a noisy rattle. I turned on the heater, blowing cold air onto my frozen hands until it slowly turned lukewarm. I backed out of the driveway. I did not look back. I drove through the suburban streets of Chicago, the familiar neighborhood passing by like a film reel. The neighbors were safe in their homes. They had no idea that the nice old man from down the street had just been discarded like a broken appliance. I drove for 40 minutes. I passed the cheap motels on the outskirts of the city. I passed the homeless shelters Bradley had so kindly listed for me. I kept driving until the suburban sprawl gave way to the towering skyline of downtown Chicago. I pulled the rusted, dented Ford up to the main entrance of the Ritz-Carlton. The valet, a young man in a pristine uniform, looked at the truck with confusion. A beat-up pickup truck did not belong here among the Bentleys and Mercedes. He started to walk over, his hand raised to wave me away, to tell me the delivery entrance was in the back. I opened the door and stepped out. I stood to my full height, ignoring the throbbing pain in my hip. I adjusted my coat. "Good evening, Michael," I said. The valet stopped. He squinted, looking past the old clothes, past the cracked glasses, past the blood on my lip. His eyes widened. "Mr. King," he stammered. Is that you? It is, I replied. Please park the truck. Be careful with the transmission, it sticks in second gear. Of course, Mr. King. Of course. Welcome back. I walked through the revolving doors. The warmth of the lobby hit me, smelling of expensive perfume and fresh lilies. The concierge, a man named Henri, who had worked there for 20 years, looked up from his desk. He saw a disheveled old man. Then he saw my eyes. Mr. King, Henri said, coming around the desk immediately. We were not expecting you. I need the penthouse, Henri, for the foreseeable future. And I need a secure line. Right this way, sir. I did not have a reservation. I did not have a credit card on me. I did not need one. In this building, my face was the black card. I took the private elevator to the top floor. The suite was exactly as I remembered it. Expansive, luxurious, with a view of the frozen lake that stretched out into darkness. I walked to the minibar, poured myself a glass of aged scotch, and sat in the leather armchair. I took a sip. The alcohol burned, a welcome sensation after the numbness of the cold. I reached into the inner pocket of my coat. I didn't have my wallet, Vanessa had checked for that, but I had something more important. I pulled out a small, sleek satellite phone that I kept powered off and hidden in the lining of my jacket. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 3 years. It rang once. O'Malley, a voice answered. Sharp. Alert. No pleasantries. It is Leo, I said. There was a pause on the other end. A long silence. Then the sound of a chair shifting, papers being moved. Leo. It has been a long time. I thought you were retired. I thought you were playing the poor pensioner. I was, I said, looking out at the city lights. But the play is over. What happened? Bradley. He kicked me out. He has the deed to the house. I told you not to sign that deed, Leo. I told you 3 years ago. I know, I said. You were right. But he made a mistake. He thinks the house is the asset. He thinks the house is the inheritance. He does not know about the trust, O'Malley said. His voice dropped an octave. He knows it exists, I corrected, but he thinks it unlocks automatically on his 40th birthday. He thinks he is 2 weeks away from $10 million. And he is wrong. O'Malley finished. I took another sip of scotch. The anger was gone now, replaced by a cold, strategic clarity. Activate Article 13. O'Malley. Article 13. Leo, that is the nuclear option. That freezes everything. It initiates the audit. It puts the entire estate into lockdown. If we do that, there is no going back. You will be declaring war on your own son. My son died tonight on that porch, I said. The man living in my house is a thief. Activate it. And O'Malley. Yes, Leo. I want a full financial report on Bradley and Vanessa. Every debt, every loan, every credit card. I want to know who they owe, how much, and when it is due. I have a feeling the yoga studio wasn't the only reason they needed my room. Consider it done. I will see you in my office at 9 a.m. I hung up the phone. I sat in the silence of the penthouse. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. I looked like a tired old man. But inside, the shark was waking up. I had built King Logistics from a single van into a global fleet. I had crushed competitors who were smarter and richer than Bradley. My son wanted my space. He wanted my absence. Well, he was about to get it. But he was also about to learn that when you throw a king in the trash, you better make sure he doesn't crawl back out with a crown. I slept fitfully that night, the luxury of the Egyptian cotton sheets, unable to soothe the ache in my hip or the hollow feeling in my chest. I woke up at 5 a.m., my internal clock still set to the rhythm of a working man. I showered, scrubbing the feeling of that cold porch off my skin. I shaved the gray stubble from my chin. At 8 a.m., a tailor arrived at the suite. O'Malley had sent him. I didn't need to ask. O'Malley knew I wouldn't walk into his office looking like a victim. Mr. King, the tailor said, bowing slightly. Mr. O'Malley said you required a wardrobe refresh. Nothing flashy, I said. Charcoal gray, wool, structured. I am not a peacock. I am a businessman. By 8:45, I stood in front of the mirror. The old man in the cardigan was gone. In his place stood Leonard King. The suit fit like armor. I put on a new pair of glasses, the frames thick and dark. I looked dangerous. I took the hotel car to O'Malley's office. It was located in a glass tower that pierced the clouds. The receptionist didn't ask for my name. She simply pressed a button under her desk, and the heavy double doors to the inner sanctum buzzed open. O'Malley was waiting. He was a small man with eyes like a hawk and a mind like a steel trap. He didn't hug me. He shook my hand firmly. You look like you are ready to kill someone, Leo, he said. I am just here to correct a mistake, I replied, sitting in the leather chair opposite his massive desk. O'Malley slid a thick file folder across the mahogany surface. Here's the report you asked for. My investigators worked all night. You were right to be suspicious. It is ugly, Leo. It is very ugly. I opened the file. The first page was a summary of Bradley's finances. The numbers were printed in red. Lots of red. Bradley wasn't just broke. He was drowning. Cryptocurrency, O'Malley explained, pointing to a series of large transfers. He leveraged everything. He bought at the peak and sold at the bottom. He lost $400,000 in 6 months. I turned the page. Vanessa, gambling, O'Malley said. Online poker. High stakes. She owes $60,000 to credit card companies, but that is the least of it. I looked at the next document. It was a lien. They took out a second mortgage on the house, I whispered. My house. They took it out 2 years ago, O'Malley corrected. They forged your signature, Leo. I stared at the document. There it was. Leonard King. It looked like my handwriting, but the loop on the G was wrong. They had stolen the equity in my home while I was sleeping under its roof. That is fraud, I said. It is prison time, O'Malley agreed. But there is more. Look at the last page. I flipped to the back. It was a loan agreement, but not from a bank. The interest rate was exorbitant. The terms were predatory. They borrowed $2 million from private lenders, O'Malley said. Loan sharks, Leo. The kind that break legs. They put the house up as collateral for that, too. I closed the file. The picture was complete. They hadn't kicked me out because Vanessa needed a yoga studio. They kicked me out because the walls were closing in. They needed to sell the house to pay off the sharks, and they couldn't do that with me sitting in the living room. And the trust fund, I asked. O'Malley leaned back. The trust fund matures in 2 weeks, on his 40th birthday. $10 million. That is their lifeboat. They are counting these days. They probably already promised that money to the sharks to buy more time. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked down at the city. My son was not just a failure. He was a criminal. He had forged my name. He had risked my home. And when the pressure got too high, he threw me out like garbage. He thinks he is getting $10 million in 2 weeks, I said softly. That is the terms of the current trust, O'Malley said. Unless the grantor changes the terms, I finished. You are the grantor, Leo, but you cannot just revoke it. It is an irrevocable trust. However, you can change the stipulations of disbursement. I turned back to O'Malley. I want to buy his debt. O'Malley blinked. Excuse me, the $2 million he owes to the loan sharks. I want to buy it. Leo, those are dangerous people. You do not want to get involved with them. I am not asking to have tea with them. Set up a shell company, an anonymous LLC, approach the lenders. Offer them full payment for the debt in exchange for the promissory note. They will take the cash. They do not care who collects as long as they get paid. O'Malley smiled slowly. A wicked, sharp smile. You want to become your son's loan shark. I want to own him, I said. I want to own the debt. I want to own the lien on the house. When he wakes up tomorrow, I don't want him to owe money to criminals. I want him to owe it to me, and he won't even know it. And the trust? O'Malley asked. Amend it. Add a clause. The caretaker clause. O'Malley nodded, understanding immediately, stipulating that the beneficiary must have provided continuous in-home care for the grantor at the primary residence until the time of the grantor's death. Exactly, I said. If he kicked me out, he violated the clause. But we need proof, O'Malley said. He will argue you left voluntarily. He will say you ran away. He will say you are senile. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. I installed security cameras in the porch and the hallway 6 months ago, I said. I had a feeling Vanessa was stealing my pain medication. I didn't catch her doing that, but I caught something better. I slid the USB drive across the desk. It has video of last night. It has audio. It has him saying, "It is not your house anymore." It has Vanessa shoving me. It has the bag in the snow. O'Malley picked up the drive as if it were a diamond. This is it, he said. This is the nail in the coffin. So what is the plan? Do we serve them with the lawsuit today? No, I said. Not yet. They are desperate. If we attack now, they might run. Or worse, they might try to hurt me to get the inheritance faster. We need them to feel safe. We need them to feel victorious. I checked my watch. Bradley turns 40 in 14 days. They are planning a party, a big one. They want to show off to their society friends. They want to celebrate the money they think is coming. We let them have the party, O'Malley guessed. We let them have the party, I confirmed. In the meantime, I disappear. Let them think I am freezing in a shelter. Let them think I am dead. Let them get comfortable. And then I said, buttoning my jacket, I am going to crash the party, and I am going to bring the house down. I left O'Malley's office with a plan. But I needed one more thing. I needed eyes on the inside. I needed to know exactly what they were doing while I was missing. I walked to a nearby park, sat on a bench, and pulled out a burner phone O'Malley had given me. I dialed a number I knew by heart. Samantha picked up on the second ring. Hello, she said, her voice sounding thick like she had been crying. Sammy, it is Grandpa. There was a gasp on the other end. Grandpa. Oh my God. Where are you? Mom said you ran away. She said you lost your mind and wandered off. I have been driving around all night looking for you. Samantha was 20 years old. Vanessa's daughter from a previous marriage. I had adopted her in my heart the day I met her. She was the only decent person in that house. I am safe, Sammy. I am okay. But I need you to listen to me very carefully. Grandpa, come home. I will protect you. I won't let them. No. I interrupted. I cannot come home, not yet. Sammy, your mother and Bradley, they didn't just kick me out. They are in trouble. Bad trouble. I know, she whispered. I heard them talking. They are talking about declaring you incompetent. My grip tightened on the phone. Tell me. They have a doctor Dr. Thorne. He came over this morning. He signed some papers. They are going to file a missing person report, but they are going to, you are a danger to yourself. They want to get conservatorship over the trust before your birthday. Dr. Thorne. I knew the name. A sleazy doctor who had lost his license twice and got it back through bribes. Okay, Sammy. That is good to know. Now I need you to do something for me. It is dangerous. You have to pretend you don't know where I am. You have to cry. You have to ask them to find me. Can you do that? I can do it, she said. But why? Because we are going to save you, Sammy. We are going to get you out of that house and away from them. But I need you to be my spy. I need to know who is coming to Bradley's birthday party. Everyone, she said. His crypto friends. Mom's yoga clients. They are renting a tent. They are hiring catering. They are spending money they don't have, Grandpa. Good, I said. Let them spend. Sammy, keep your head down. If they ask you haven't heard from me, I will contact you in 2 days. I love you, Grandpa. I love you too, kiddo. Stay strong. I hung up. They were moving faster than I thought. Conservatorship. That was their play. If they declared me incompetent, the caretaker clause wouldn't matter because they would legally be me. They could sign the waiver themselves. I had to move faster. I dialed O'Malley again. Change of plans, I said. We cannot wait 2 weeks. Why, Leo? They have a dirty doctor. They are going for conservatorship. Then we strike now. No, I said. If we strike now, it is a legal battle. It takes months. I need to destroy their credibility instantly. I need to catch them in the act. What do you want to do? Get me a disguise, I said. I am going back to the neighborhood. You are what? I am going to give them exactly what they want. They want a crazy, senile old man wandering the streets. I will give them one. I am going to show up at that party, O'Malley, and I am going to look like hell. Leo, that is risky. It is the only way. I need them to confess. I need them to say it out loud in front of witnesses. I need to be the bait. I could hear O'Malley smiling through the phone. The honey pot, he said. Exactly. Prepare the papers, buy the debt, and have the police on standby for the night of the party. I am going undercover. I hung up the phone and looked out at the cold, gray city. My son wanted to treat me like trash. Fine. I would become the trash. And when he tried to sweep me away, he was going to find out that some trash is toxic. The elevator ride to the 45th floor of the Sterling Tower was silent and smooth, a stark contrast to the rattling suspension of my old Ford truck. I watched the numbers climb, feeling a strange sensation settle in my chest. It was not fear. It was the heavy, cold weight of armor locking into place. For 10 years, I had played the role of the gentle, retired father. I had worn cardigans and reading glasses, sipping tea while my son lectured me on the modern world. I had let myself become invisible. But as the doors slid open with a soft chime revealing the marble-floored lobby of O'Malley and Associates, the old man died. Leonard King, the man who had crushed unions and swallowed competitors whole in the logistics game, stepped out. The receptionist was new, a young woman who looked like she had just graduated law school. She glanced up, her eyes scanning my charcoal suit, the way the fabric draped perfectly over my shoulders, the polished shine of my shoes. She did not see a victim. She saw money. May I help you, sir? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Tell Patrick that Leo is here, I said. My voice was low, gravelly, the voice that used to bark orders over a radio frequency to a fleet of 500 trucks. She did not ask for a last name. She picked up the phone, whispered 2 words, and then nodded to the heavy mahogany double doors at the end of the hall. They buzzed open before she even hung up. I walked down the corridor, passing framed photographs of the city skyline. I stopped at one. It showed the industrial district down by the docks. I could see the roof of my old headquarters, the faded blue K painted on the corrugated metal. King Logistics. I had built it from nothing. I had started with 1 second-hand delivery van and a map of Chicago. I drove 18 hours a day, slept in the cabin, ate cold sandwiches, and fought for every contract. By the time I was 50, I controlled 40% of the shipping routes in the Midwest. I was the king of the road. And I had sold it all, liquidated my empire for one reason: to be a father, to be present, to give Bradley the attention I had denied him while I was building my kingdom. I turned away from the photo. That was the tragedy of my life. I had built an empire to secure his future, and in doing so I had created a son who was incapable of building anything of his own. I entered the corner office. Patrick O'Malley stood by the window looking out at the gray expanse of Lake Michigan. He turned as I entered. We had been friends for 30 years. He had been my legal shark when I was acquiring smaller companies. He knew where the bodies were buried because he had helped me dig the graves. "You look like you're ready for a hostile takeover, Leo," he said, a grim smile touching his lips. I sat in the leather chair opposite his desk, declining the drink he offered with a wave of my hand. I needed a clear head. "This is a hostile takeover, Patrick. I am taking back my dignity, and I am taking back my money." Patrick sat down, opened a drawer, and pulled out a thick, leather-bound binder. He placed it on the desk between us. The gold lettering on the spine caught the light. "The Bradley King Irrevocable Trust." I stared at the binder. I remembered the day I signed it. It was 20 years ago. Bradley was 18, heading off to college. I wanted to ensure he would never want for anything. I wanted to give him a safety net. I did not realize I was weaving a hammock that would make him lazy for the rest of his life. Remind me of the terms I said, though I knew them by heart. Patrick opened the binder, flipping past the pages of legalese until he reached the distribution schedule. "The principal sum currently valued at $10,400,000 and change is held in trust," Patrick read. "The beneficiary, Bradley King, has received monthly stipends of $5,000 since the age of 25. I nodded. That was the money he used to buy his fancy sneakers and lease his sports cars. He thought it was the interest. He did not know it was just the crumbs falling from the table. "And the lump sum?" I asked. Patrick tapped the page. "Here is the clause. Article 4, Section B. The entirety of the principal and accrued interest shall be distributed to the beneficiary upon his 40th birthday, provided he has not been convicted of a felony and is of sound mind." 2 weeks, I whispered. "Exactly 14 days, Patrick confirmed. He closes his eyes at night dreaming of this binder, Leo. He knows it is coming. He has probably already spent half of it in his head." I leaned back, steepled my fingers. That was why they were desperate. That was why they had tolerated me for so long, and why they had snapped now. They were in a financial hole so deep they could not see the sky. They had leveraged everything against this date. They assumed the money would hit the account, they would pay off the loan sharks, pay off the mortgage, and live like royalty. And I was just an annoyance in the spare room, a piece of furniture that breathed too loud. "They think it is automatic," I said. "It is automatic," Patrick corrected, "unless the grantor, that is you, intervenes. But it is an irrevocable trust, Leo. We made it that way to protect it from creditors and taxes. You cannot just dissolve it because you are angry. You need cause." "I have cause," I said, my voice hardening. "I have cause written in the snow on my driveway." Patrick looked at me over his glasses. "We need to be surgical about this. If we just cancel it, he will sue. He will say you are mentally incompetent. He will say you are vindictive. We need a loophole that he walked into himself." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the USB drive containing the footage from the security cameras. I placed it on top of the binder. "There is your loophole, Patrick. But we are not going to cancel the trust. That is too messy. We are going to amend the conditions of release." Patrick raised an eyebrow. "Amend them how?" "We are going to add a codicil, a character clause. Something that requires the beneficiary to demonstrate moral standing, specifically the care of his aging parents." I watched Patrick's mind work. He was a brilliant lawyer, but he was cautious. You want to make the $10 million contingent on him having treated you well, he said slowly. No, I said. I want to make it contingent on him treating me well until I die. I stood up and walked to the wall where Patrick kept his degrees. I looked at the reflection of the city. I hid who I was for a long time, Patrick. I let Bradley think I was a mid-level manager who got a lucky buyout. I never told him about the sheer scale of King Logistics. I never told him about the offshore accounts, the real estate portfolio in Europe, the blind trusts. I wanted him to be hungry. He is hungry, Patrick said. He is starving. That is the problem. He is not hungry for work, I snapped, turning around. He is hungry for easy money. He thinks wealth is a right, not a result. When I was his age, I had grease under my fingernails that I couldn't scrub out for a week. Bradley pays a man $50 to trim his cuticles. I walked back to the desk and placed my hand on the binder. He thinks he is getting this money in 2 weeks. We are going to let him think that. We are going to let him throw his party. We are going to let him invite every leech and hanger-on in Chicago. We are going to let him raise a glass to his future. And then Patrick asked, a glint of excitement entering his eyes. And then I am going to walk in, I said. I am going to walk in there, and I am going to introduce him to the CEO of King Logistics. I am going to show him exactly who he threw out in the trash. Patrick smiled. He opened his laptop. I will start drafting the amendment. The caretaker clause. We will define care as providing a safe, warm, and respectful environment within the primary family residence, which he violated yesterday, I said, which he violated violently. Patrick agreed, which means the trust does not dissolve. It does not pay out. It rolls over. Rolls over to whom I asked, to the secondary beneficiary. Or if none is named, it reverts to a charitable foundation of the grantor's choosing. I thought about Samantha, my granddaughter, the only person in that house who had ever looked at me with kindness, who had ever made me a cup of tea without sighing. She was innocent in this. She was a victim of her mother's ambition just as much as I was. Create a new secondary beneficiary, I said. Samantha. But put it in a blind trust. She cannot touch it until she is 25. I won't have her mother getting her claws into it. Done, Patrick said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. And Patrick, I added, one more thing. The house, what about it? Bradley thinks he owns it because I signed that deed. But we never filed the transfer with the county clerk, did we? Patrick stopped typing. He looked up, a devious grin spreading across his face. No, Leo, we didn't. You told me to hold on to it in escrow just in case. It is sitting in the safe in the other room. Technically, legally, that house is still 100% yours. I sat back, a laugh bubbling up in my chest. It was a cold, dark laugh. So he kicked me out of my own house based on a piece of paper that isn't even registered. He is trespassing, Patrick said. Every minute he sleeps in that bed, he is trespassing. Good, I said. Let him sleep. Let him feel safe. Because when I pull the rug out, I want him to fall from the penthouse to the pavement. I looked at the binder one last time. $10 million. It was just paper. It was just numbers. But to my son, it was oxygen, and I was about to pinch the tube. I stood up, buttoning my jacket. The meeting was over. The pieces were moving. Get the paperwork ready, Patrick. I have a party to crash. As I walked out of the office, I felt lighter. The ghost of the sad old man was gone. The king had returned, and the king was in a very, very bad mood. I checked my watch, my cheap plastic digital watch that I had bought at a drugstore after Vanessa stole my Patek Philippe. It was time to go to work. I had a debt to buy and a lesson to teach, a lesson that would cost my son exactly $10 million. Patrick pressed a button on his intercom, and a moment later a man walked in, who looked less like a lawyer and more like a shadow that had detached itself from the wall. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my truck, but he wore it with a casual disregard that suggested he often had to run in it. This was Miller, the private investigator O'Malley kept on retainer for situations exactly like this. He didn't smile, he didn't offer a hand, he simply slid a black file folder onto the mahogany desk right next to the trust binder. It looked thin, innocent even, but I knew better. In my line of work, I learned that the thinnest files often contained the heaviest casualties. I reached out and opened it. The first thing I saw was a photograph of my son. It wasn't the Bradley I saw at Sunday dinners, the one who complained about the cost of organic milk. This Bradley was sitting at a high-stakes poker table in a casino in Atlantic City, laughing with a drink in his hand and a stack of chips in front of him that could have paid off a mortgage. The timestamp was from 3 weeks ago, the same week he told me they couldn't afford to fix the heating in my room. Miller cleared his throat, and his voice was dry like rustling paper. The subject is insolvent, Mr. King, completely and utterly underwater. We ran a full forensic audit of his accounts and his wife's. It is a house of cards built on a swamp. I turned the page and the numbers hit me like a physical blow. I had built a fortune by understanding margins, by calculating risk, by knowing where every penny went. My son apparently treated money like it was water in a sieve. There were credit card statements with balances that made my eyes water. Visa, American Express, MasterCard, all maxed out. The interest payments alone were enough to support a family of 4. He got into crypto, Miller explained, pointing to a series of highlighted transactions. He bought in at the peak, leveraged everything. He took out personal loans to buy coins that are now worth less than the electricity it took to mine them. He lost $400,000 in 6 months. I stared at the red ink. 400,000. That was capital. That was seed money for a business. That was a legacy. And he had vaporized it on digital gambling because he thought he was smarter than the market. He thought he was smarter than work. But that is not the worst of it, O'Malley said softly. Turn to tab 3, Leo. I flipped the tab. It was a copy of a document from the Teachers' Pension Fund. My stomach turned over. When I retired or pretended to retire, I kept a small pension from a brief stint I did consulting for the city years ago. It wasn't much, maybe $1,200 a month. It was the money I used to buy groceries. It was the money I used to buy birthday presents for Samantha. It was the money that allowed me to maintain the illusion that I was poor but self-sufficient. The document was a withdrawal form, a lump sum liquidation of the entire account. Value $80,000. Dated 2 months ago. At the bottom was a signature. Leonard King. I traced the signature with my thumb. It was a good forgery. He had practiced. He had probably sat at my kitchen table while I was asleep, practicing my name until he got the loop of the L just right. He stole your safety net, Leo. O'Malley said, his voice hard. He didn't know you had millions. As far as he knew, that pension was the only thing keeping you from starving. And he stole it. He didn't just want your room, he wanted to strip the meat off your bones. I felt a coldness spread through my veins that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. This was not just greed. This was cruelty. He thought I was a helpless old man, and he took the crutch out from under my arm. He spent my survival money on what? I looked at the next page. A lease agreement for a Range Rover. A trip to the Maldives for Vanessa's Instagram. Designer handbags. He stole my dignity to buy his wife a purse. There is more, Miller said. And this is the part that makes him dangerous. I turned to the final section of the report. It was a property title search. My house, Ma. The house I built with Catherine. The house where Bradley took his first steps. The house where I had mourned my wife. There was a lien on it. That I expected. I knew they had forged my name for a second mortgage. But there was another lien. A new one. dated 4 days ago. The lender listed wasn't a bank. It wasn't a credit union. It was an LLC registered in Nevada called Cerberus Holdings. Who are they, I asked, though the name alone gave me a bad feeling. Hard money lenders, Miller said. That is the polite term. They are loan sharks, Leo. High-level, sophisticated loan sharks, but sharks nonetheless. They lend to desperate people who have been laughed out of every bank in the city. The interest rate is 25% monthly. I did the math in my head instantly. That was usury. That was impossible to pay back. He borrowed $2 million against the house, Miller continued. He told them he owned it free and clear. He showed them the deed transfer you signed. He told them the appraisal value was $3 million. $2 million. I looked up at O'Malley. Where did the money go? It is not in his accounts. It is gone, Miller said. He used it to pay off gambling debts to a bookie in Vegas and to cover margin calls on his crypto accounts. He threw $2 million into a black hole to stop it from swallowing him, and it wasn't enough. And here is the kicker, O'Malley said, leaning forward. Look at the terms of the loan, the default clause. I read the fine print. It was brutal. If the borrower missed a single payment, the lender had the right to immediate foreclosure and possession of the property. No grace period. No negotiation. Immediate eviction. The first payment is due on the 1st of the month, Miller said. I checked my watch. That was 3 days away. The realization hit me with the force of a freight train. The yoga studio, the sudden urgency, the violence on the porch. They didn't kick me out because Vanessa wanted to do yoga, I whispered. No, O'Malley said. They kicked you out because they have to sell the house. They have to flip it or refinance it before the First or Cerberus Holdings takes it. And they couldn't have a listing agent walk through the property with an old man living in the den. They couldn't stage it as a luxury bachelor pad with your walker in the hallway. They were erasing me. They were scrubbing the house clean of my existence so they could sell my home to pay for their mistakes. If they don't pay by the 1st, Miller said, Cerberus takes the keys. And these guys don't file paperwork, Leo. They send guys with crowbars. Bradley knows this. He is terrified. That is why he snapped. He is a rat in a trap, and he chewed through his own father to try and get out. I closed the file. The leather cover felt cool under my hand. I thought about the envelope Bradley had given me. The $100. He had stolen my pension worth $80,000. He had leveraged my home for $2 million, and he gave me $100 and a list of homeless shelters. He isn't just broke, I said, my voice steady but hollow. He is morally bankrupt. There is nothing left. He is banking on the trust fund. O'Malley reminded me. He thinks the $10 million drops in 2 weeks. He probably told the loan sharks he can pay them off in full on his birthday. That is how he got the loan. He promised them the inheritance. So he sold my past to pay for his present, and he sold my legacy to pay for his future, I said. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the ant-like cars crawling through the streets of Chicago. I felt a strange sense of detachment. The grief was gone. The anger was gone. What was left was a clinical need to excise a tumor. Bradley King was no longer my son. He was a bad investment. He was a liability. And in business, when you have a liability, you liquidate it. O'Malley, I said, turning back to the room. Who runs Cerberus Holdings? A man named Vinnie DeLuca Miller answered. Not a nice guy. Contact him, I said. O'Malley blinked. Leo, we talked about this. You don't want to owe Vinnie money. I don't want to owe him, I said. I want to buy him out. Offer him $2.2 million, I said. That gives him a 10% profit in 4 days. He won't say no to quick cash. I want to buy the note. I want to buy the lien. I want to be the one holding the paper when the 1st of the month comes around. You want to foreclose on your own son. O'Malley asked, his eyebrows raising. No, I said. Foreclosure is too slow. I want to hold the debt over his head like a guillotine. I want him to sweat. I want him to have his party. I want him to think he got away with it. And when he blows out the candles, I want to be the one to tell him that his wish didn't come true. I looked at the file one last time at the picture of my smiling, reckless son. Buy the debt, O'Malley, and get the paperwork ready for the trust amendment. We are going to rewrite history. And the forgery, Miller asked, pointing to the pension withdrawal. That is a felony. Do we go to the police? Not yet, I said. That is my ace in the hole. That is my leverage. If he tries to fight me, if he tries to claim rights to the house, I will hang that forgery around his neck like a millstone. He traded a father for a signature. Now he is going to learn what his name is really worth. I buttoned my jacket. I had a lot of work to do. I had to become a ghost. I had to watch my son dance on my grave while I was digging his. Get it done, I said. I walked out of the office, leaving the black file on the desk. It was the autopsy report of my family, and I was the coroner. I stood by the window of O'Malley's office, watching the gray slush of the Chicago streets far below. The silence in the room was heavy, thick with the smoke of a bridge I had just mentally burned. My hands were clasped behind my back, gripping my wrists so tightly my knuckles were white. The physical pain was a necessary distraction from the hollow ache in my chest. It is a specific kind of agony to realize that the child you held in your arms, the boy you taught to ride a bike, has grown up to become a man who would sell your skeleton for parts. Bradley hadn't just made mistakes. He hadn't just stumbled. He had actively, maliciously calculated the value of my life and decided it was less than the price of his comfort. He had forged my signature. He had leveraged the roof over my head. He had looked at me, his father, and seen nothing but a line of credit to be maxed out. O'Malley cleared his throat behind me. The sound was tentative, respectful. He was waiting for the order. He expected me to write a check. He expected the father to step in and clean up the mess, to pay off the $2 million, to make the bad men go away, and then to scold his son over a Sunday dinner. That is what fathers do. They save. But I was not just a father anymore. I was a businessman who had just discovered an embezzler in his company. And you do not promote an embezzler. You terminate him. I turned around. My face felt like it was carved from granite. Do not pay off the debt, Patrick. O'Malley blinked, his pen hovering over his legal pad. Leo, if we do not pay it, Cerberus Holdings will foreclose on the 1st. That is 3 days away. They will take the house. They will throw Bradley and Vanessa onto the street. And since the deed transfer wasn't filed, they will technically be throwing you onto the street, legally speaking. It will be a mess. I walked back to the desk and placed my hands flat on the cool mahogany surface. I did not say we let it go to default. I said we do not pay it off for him. There is a difference. I leaned in, my voice dropping to a low rumble. I want you to buy the note. Malley froze. He stared at me, his sharp lawyer's mind racing to catch up with my intent. Buy the note, he repeated slowly. You mean, you want to become the lender? Exactly, I said. I want you to set up a shell company immediately. Call it Apex Acquisitions. Make it blind. Make it untraceable. Then contact Vinny DeLuca at Cerberus. Tell him an investment firm is looking to acquire high-risk distressed assets. Offer him full face value for the loan, plus a 10% premium for an immediate closing. Cash wire. Today. O'Malley sat back, a look of awe and slight terror crossing his face. Leo, you are talking about paying $2.2 million to a loan shark effectively to buy your own son's debt. Why? Why not just pay it and be done with it? Because if I pay it, he learns nothing, I snapped. If I pay it, he thinks he got away with it. He thinks he is smart. He thinks the universe provided a miracle. I do not want him to feel relief, Patrick. I want him to feel the noose tightening. I paced the room, the energy of the deal flowing through me, now replacing the grief. If I buy the note, I step into the shoes of the lender. I own the lien. I own the mortgage. I own the leverage. When the first of the month comes and he cannot pay, he doesn't default to Vinny DeLuca. He defaults to me. And you can foreclose, O'Malley whispered. I can do whatever I want, I said. I can grant an extension. I can demand immediate payment. I can seize the collateral. I become the master of his fate. And he won't know. He will think he is dealing with a faceless corporation. He will think he is dealing with Apex Acquisitions. He won't know that the man holding the axe is the same man he threw out in the snow. O'Malley nodded slowly, a small smile playing on his lips. It was the smile of a predator recognizing another predator. It is brilliant, Leo. Dark but brilliant. It gives us total control. It gives us the timeline I added. We control the clock. We can let him sweat until the party. We can let him think he is juggling chainsaws, and right when he thinks he is about to drop one, we can catch it only to hit him with it later. Get Vinny on the phone, I commanded. Do it now. I want that paper in my hand by 5 p.m. I want to own every cent of his misery. O'Malley reached for the phone. I sat down in the leather chair and closed my eyes. I listened as he made the call. I listened as he navigated the underworld vernacular, speaking the language of hard money and fast closings. I heard the deal being struck. Vinny DeLuca was happy. He was getting his money back plus a bonus without having to break any legs. He didn't care who bought the debt. To him, Bradley was just a bad bet. He was happy to offload. When O'Malley hung up, it was done. The wire transfer was initiated. By the end of the business day, I would be my son's biggest creditor. I felt a strange, cold satisfaction. It wasn't happiness. It was the grim satisfaction of a surgeon cutting out gangrene. It had to be done to save the body, even if it meant losing the limb. Now, I said, opening my eyes. Let's talk about the forgery. I pointed to the copy of the pension withdrawal form. This is my insurance policy. The debt gives me control over the house. But this gives me control over his freedom. He committed a felony, O'Malley said. Federal wire fraud. Identity theft. If we report this, he goes to prison for 5 to 10 years. I picked up the document. I looked at the shaky signature that tried so hard to look like mine. Draft a confession, I said. A confession. Yes, a full admission of guilt. Admitting to the forgery, admitting to the theft of the pension, admitting to the fraudulent mortgage. Draft it up. Keep it in your briefcase. You are going to make him sign it. Malley guessed. I am going to give him a choice, I said. When the time comes. When the walls fall down. I am going to give him a choice between the police and total surrender. I want him to sign away any claim he thinks he has to the estate. I want him to sign away his dignity. If he signs, he stays out of jail. If he refuses... I let the sentence hang in the air. We both knew the answer. You are playing a dangerous game, Leo, O'Malley said softly. You are dismantling his life piece by piece. He dismantled mine first, I said, standing up. He just didn't finish the job. He left me alive. That was his mistake. I walked over to the window again. The city lights were starting to flicker on as the winter afternoon faded into twilight. Somewhere out there in my house, Bradley was probably pouring himself a drink, thinking he had solved his problem. He was probably looking at my empty chair and feeling relieved. He had no idea that the chair wasn't empty. A ghost was sitting in it. A ghost with a checkbook and a grudge. I turned back to O'Malley. I need cash, Patrick. Walking around money. I cannot use my cards. Vanessa might be tracking them, trying to see if the senile old man is spending money. O'Malley opened a safe behind his desk. He pulled out a thick envelope. 10,000, he said. Untraceable. I took the envelope and tucked it into my inside pocket. It felt solid, reassuring. I am going underground, Patrick. I will stay at the Ritz, but I will be moving during the day. I need to set the stage for the party. I need to make sure my appearance is impactful. You are going to enjoy this, aren't you? O'Malley asked, watching me closely. I paused at the door. I thought about the boy I used to carry on my shoulders. I thought about the man who had handed me $100 and told me to get lost. No, Patrick, I said, my voice heavy with a sadness I couldn't hide. I am not going to enjoy it, but I am going to do it. Because a father's job is to teach his son how the world works, and Bradley is about to learn that in the real world, actions have consequences, and the bill always comes due. I walked out of the office and into the elevator. As I descended, I felt the persona of Leo King, the ruthless CEO, fully take over. The grieving father was gone. In his place was the chairman of the board, and I was about to call the meeting to order. The agenda was simple: total liquidation. I sat in the darkness of the Ritz-Carlton penthouse, the blue glow of my laptop screen illuminating the glass of scotch in my hand. On the screen, a live feed from the hidden cameras in my old house played out like a reality show of the morally bankrupt. It had been 3 days since they threw me out into the snow. 3 days since I became a ghost in my own life. And in those 3 days, my son and his wife had not shed a single tear. They had not called the police. They had not checked the hospitals. They had thrown a party. Well, not the big party yet. That was coming. But they were celebrating in their own way. I watched as Vanessa directed 2 workmen who were hauling my old oak bookshelf out of what used to be my bedroom. That bookshelf had been a wedding gift from my father. It was solid wood, heavy with history. Vanessa waved a hand dismissively as the workers banged it against the doorframe, chipping the wood. "Just get it out," she said, her voice tinny through the laptop speakers. "Put it on the curb with the rest of the junk. I want this room stripped to the studs by tomorrow. The contractor is coming to install the bamboo flooring for the yoga studio on Monday." Bradley walked into the frame. He was holding a glass of champagne, wearing a silk robe I had never seen before. He looked relaxed. He looked like a man who had just laid down a heavy burden. "Did you call the caterer?" he asked, taking a sip. "Done," Vanessa replied, turning to him with a beaming smile. "We are going with the platinum package. Lobster tails, Wagyu sliders, and a champagne tower. It is going to be the event of the season, Brad. Everyone who is anyone in Chicago is coming." Bradley laughed, a sound that grated on my nerves. "It is going to cost a fortune, Ness. We are already over budget on the renovations." "Who cares?" she said, walking over to wrap her arms around his neck. "In 10 days, you turn 40. In 10 days, the trust fund unlocks. $10 million, Brad. We can pay for 1,000 parties. We are rich. We just have to wait for the calendar to turn." I took a slow sip of my scotch. They were so confident. They were spending money they didn't have, banking on a future I had already rewritten. They had no idea that the $2 million loan they were ignoring had been purchased by Apex Acquisitions just hours ago. They had no idea that their new creditor was watching them from a penthouse suite 5 miles away. Bradley kissed her, then pulled back, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. "You don't think he will come back, do you?" "The old man?" Vanessa scoffed. "Please. He has too much pride. He is probably in a shelter somewhere eating soup with a plastic spoon. Or maybe he got on a bus to Florida. Who cares? The important thing is he is gone. The house is ours. The negative energy is gone." They clinked glasses. "To new beginnings," Bradley said. "To us," Vanessa corrected. I closed the laptop. The rage was still there, burning low and hot like a pilot light, but it was overshadowed by disgust. They weren't just greedy. They were callous. They were erasing 40 years of my existence as if I were a stain on the carpet. The next few days were a masterclass in hubris. Through my network of spies, primarily Samantha, and the financial reports O'Malley sent over, I watched them dig their hole deeper. They weren't just planning a birthday party. They were planning a coronation. They rented a massive heated tent for the backyard because the house wasn't big enough to hold the ego they were projecting. They hired a DJ from New York. They ordered ice sculptures. One of them was supposed to be a dollar sign. I wished I was making that up. I spent my days moving through the city like a phantom. I met with Samantha in the back of a diner 2 towns over. She looked tired, her eyes red-rimmed. "They are telling everyone you went to visit a sick relative in Arizona," she told me, clutching her coffee cup. "That is the official story. But when they think I am not listening, they joke about it. Mom said she hopes you forgot your coat." She paused, looking down at the table. "Grandpa, they raided your savings account, the one at the local branch." "I knew," I said gently. "The 20,000 I kept for emergencies." "They forged a power of attorney," she whispered. "Mom practiced your signature for hours. They took it all out in cash. They used it to pay the deposit for the party planner." I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. "Let them take it, Sammy. It is just paper. It is bait. But it is your money. It is evidence," I corrected. "Every dollar they steal is another year on their sentence." "Are they still planning to file the missing person report?" "Tomorrow," she said. "They have the doctor lined up. Dr. Thorne. He is going to sign an affidavit saying you have dementia and wandered off. They want to get emergency conservatorship before the birthday so they can access the trust immediately when it unlocks." "Excellent," I said. It was falling into place. They were walking right into the trap. "You need to be careful, Sammy. Don't let them see you crying. Be excited about the party. Ask them what you should wear." "I don't want to go to their stupid party." "You have to," I said firmly. "I need you there. When I walk in, I need to know where you are so I can keep you safe. Because when the walls come down, it is going to get messy." I went back to the hotel and called O'Malley. "They are spending the cash from the local account," I told him. "They are liquidating everything they can touch." "Good," O'Malley said. "That proves intent. It proves predatory behavior. And Leo, we got the confirmation from the loan sharks. The debt is ours. You officially own the mortgage on your own house. Send them a notice," I said. "A foreclosure notice?" "No. A welcome letter. Send it from Apex Acquisitions. Tell them their loan has been purchased. Tell them we are reviewing the file. Don't demand payment yet. Just let them know there is a new wolf at the door. I want to see if it makes them sweat." It didn't make them sweat. It made them reckless. I watched on the camera feed when Bradley opened the letter. He stood in the kitchen reading the heavy bond paper. He frowned for a second, then shrugged and tossed it onto the counter. "What is that?" Vanessa asked. "Chopping vegetables for a green smoothie." "Just a notice," Bradley said. "Some company called Apex bought our loan. Probably just administrative." "Does it change the due date?" "Doesn't say. It just says under review. It buys us time, Ness. If they are reviewing the file, they won't foreclose on the 1st. We are golden. We have until the birthday." He actually laughed. He thought a bureaucratic delay was a stroke of luck. He didn't realize it was the silence of a sniper taking a breath before the shot. 2 days before the party, I decided it was time to prepare my costume. I couldn't walk in there wearing a $3,000 suit. I needed to look like the victim they wanted me to be. I needed to look like the trash they threw out. I went to a surplus store on the south side. I bought a heavy stained military surplus coat that smelled of mothballs and damp wool. I bought boots that were 2 sizes too big and scuffed beyond repair. I bought a knit cap that was unraveling at the seams. Back in the hotel suite, I looked at myself in the mirror. I stopped shaving. I let the gray stubble grow in patchy and rough. I stopped using lotion. I let the cold winter air chap my lips and redden my skin. I practiced my walk. I exaggerated the limp from my hip. I hunched my shoulders. I let my mouth hang slightly open, giving my face a vacant, confused look. It was terrifying how easy it was to disappear. Without the suit, without the posture of command, I was just another old man that people looked through on the street. I was invisible. But beneath the rags I wore a wire. O'Malley had procured a high-end recording device sewn into the lining of the filthy coat. I wasn't just going to crash the party. I was going to capture every word. The night before the party, the house was buzzing. The tent was up in the backyard, glowing like a white spaceship. Caterers were bringing in crates of wine. A florist was arranging elaborate centerpieces of white orchids. I watched Bradley standing on the deck surveying his kingdom. He looked proud. He looked like a man who had won. He lit a cigar, puffing smoke into the night air. I checked my phone. A text from O'Malley. The judge signed the warrant. The police are briefed. We are green for tomorrow night. I looked at Bradley on the screen one last time. Enjoy your cigar, son. It is the last one you will smoke as a free man. I turned off the feed. I poured the rest of the scotch down the sink. I didn't need it. I needed to be sharp. I needed to be hungry. Tomorrow I would walk into the lion's den. But I wasn't the lamb. I was the hunter wearing the lamb's skin, and the lions were about to find out that they had bitten off much more than they could chew. The neon sign of the diner flickered with a dying buzz that matched the knot in my stomach. I sat in the back booth wearing a baseball cap pulled low and a windbreaker I had bought at a thrift store. I wasn't Leo King, the owner of Apex Acquisitions, tonight. I was just an old man nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee waiting for a lifeline. I checked my cheap digital watch. Samantha was 3 minutes late. In my old life, 3 minutes was a rounding error. In this life where my own son was hunting me, 3 minutes felt like a lifetime. Then the door chimed. Samantha walked in. She looked terrible. Her eyes were swollen, red-rimmed from lack of sleep, and she kept checking over her shoulder as if she expected the secret police to be tailing her. She spotted me and rushed over, sliding into the booth with a desperation that broke my heart. She didn't hug me. She grabbed my hands across the sticky table, her grip surprisingly strong. "Grandpa," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You have to leave town. You have to go now. They are not just looking for you. They are building a cage for you." I squeezed her hands, trying to transfer some of my cold resolve into her shaking frame. "I am not going anywhere, Sammy. I am exactly where I need to be. Now tell me. You said on the phone there was a new development. What is it?" She took a ragged breath, looking around the empty diner before leaning in close. "It is Mom. And Dr. Thorne. They had a meeting this morning at the house. I listened from the top of the stairs. They aren't just going to declare you incompetent, Grandpa. They are going to erase you." I leaned in. "Give me the details. Every word." "They are filing a silver alert tomorrow morning," she said, the words tumbling out. "They are going to tell the police that you wandered off in a state of dementia. They are going to say you have been aggressive, that you are a danger to yourself and others." "That is a standard play," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It establishes a narrative. I expected that." "No, you don't understand," Samantha insisted, her eyes wide with fear. "Dr. Thorne signed the papers today, but he didn't date them for today. He backdated them. He signed an affidavit stating that he examined you 3 weeks ago before you left. He wrote that he diagnosed you with advanced aggressive dementia and recommended immediate institutionalization." My jaw tightened. That was the escalation I hadn't foreseen. Backdating medical records was a felony. It was fraud on a massive scale. It meant that legally I was already incompetent when I signed the hotel register. It meant that legally Bradley and Vanessa were already my guardians. He did what I asked, my voice low and dangerous. He created a paper trail that doesn't exist, Samantha said. He produced charts, notes, prescriptions. He faked an entire medical history for the last 6 months. He wrote that you have been hallucinating, that you have been violent with Bradley. Violent. I almost laughed. The only violence in that house was the gravity that pulled me to the concrete when Vanessa shoved me. And there is more, Samantha continued, tears spilling onto her cheeks. Because Dr. Thorne certified that you were incompetent 3 weeks ago, Bradley is filing for an emergency ex parte conservatorship tomorrow morning. He is going to ask a judge to give him immediate control of your person and your assets without a hearing. He is going to argue that since you are missing and dangerous, he needs the power to freeze your accounts to protect you. I sat back, absorbing the genius of their cruelty. An ex parte hearing meant I wouldn't be there to defend myself. The judge would only see the weeping son and the professional medical opinion of a licensed doctor. He would sign the order. Bradley would become my legal owner before I even finished my coffee. They are terrified, I said softly. They are panicking, Samantha corrected. That letter from Apex Acquisitions messed them up bad. Mom is freaking out about the house being foreclosed. She keeps screaming that they need access to the trust fund right now. They can't wait for the birthday. If they get the conservatorship tomorrow, they can access the trust funds early to pay for your care. They are going to use your own money to pay off the loan sharks, Grandpa. It was a smart play. Evil, but smart. They were going to use the legal system to bypass the trust's birthday clause. If I was incompetent, the trustee could release funds for my welfare. And naturally, my welfare would include paying the mortgage on the house where I supposedly lived. Did you see the papers, Sammy? I asked. I took pictures, she said, pulling her phone from her pocket. I waited until they were drinking wine on the patio. I went into Dad's office. They were right on the desk. She slid the phone over. I scrolled through the images. There it was. The affidavit signed by Dr. Elias Thorne. The petition for emergency guardianship. The lies were detailed, specific, and damning. They claimed I had set a small fire in the kitchen. They claimed I didn't recognize my own son. Send these to me, I said. Right now. She tapped the screen and my burner phone vibrated. I had the evidence. Now I had the noose. Grandpa, what are you going to do? Samantha asked, taking her phone back. If the police find you after that silver alert goes out, they won't listen to you. They will see a confused old man. They will drug you and hand you over to Bradley. You will wake up in a locked ward. I looked at my granddaughter. She was the only pure thing in this mess. She was risking everything to warn me. I am not going to hide from the police, Sammy. I am going to walk right into the trap. What? They want a crazy old man, I said. They want a confused, disheveled father who ruined their party. I am going to give them exactly that. But I need you to do one more thing. It is the hardest thing I will ever ask you to do. Anything, she said. Tomorrow night at the party, I need you to make sure the back gate is unlocked. And I need you to make sure Dr. Thorne is there. He is coming, she said. Mom invited him. He is the guest of honor practically. They are celebrating the success of their plan. Good, I said. When I walk in, I want you to stay away from me. Do not run to me. Do not hug me. Look at me with pity. Look at me with fear. You have to sell it, Sammy. Because if they think for 1 second that we are working together, they will turn on you too. And I cannot protect you if I am in a cell. I can do it, she said, her voice stealing. I hate them, Grandpa. I hate what they did to you. Hate is good, I said. Hate keeps you warm. But don't let it blind you. We are playing chess, not boxing. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. It contained $5,000 in cash. Hide this, I said. Somewhere they will never look. Inside a vent taped under a drawer. If anything goes wrong, if I don't make it out of there, you take this and you run. You go to O'Malley's office. He has instructions. She took the envelope, her hands shaking again. You are scaring me. I am scared too, kiddo, I lied. I wasn't scared. I was focused. But she needed to believe the stakes were life and death because they were. I stood up. I couldn't stay long. Exposure was risky. Go home, Sammy. Be the good daughter. Cry a little. Ask them if they found Grandpa. Feed their ego. She stood up and hugged me then. It was a fierce, desperate hug. Please come back, she whispered. I pulled away and looked her in the eye. I put a hand on her cheek. The man who comes back tomorrow night won't be the grandpa you know, I said. But he is the grandpa you need. Now go. She turned and ran out of the diner. I watched her go, making sure no one was following her. I waited 10 minutes, finishing my cold coffee. Dr. Thorne. I knew his reputation. He was a man who liked gambling almost as much as my son. He had debts. That is why he was susceptible to bribery. He had sold his oath for a quick payout. I pulled out my phone and dialed O'Malley. We have a new player, I said. Dr. Elias Thorne. He falsified medical records. I know him, O'Malley said, his voice crisp. He is a bottom feeder. He backdated a dementia diagnosis, I said. They are filing for emergency guardianship tomorrow. That complicates things, Leo. If they get a judge to sign that order before the party, they won't, I cut in. Because you are going to file an emergency motion to block it. Use the affidavit from my actual doctor, the one from last year. Create a conflict. Stall the judge, just give me 24 hours. I can do that, O'Malley said. But Leo, if Thorne is there, he will testify on the spot that you are incompetent. He will try to have you sedated. Let him try, I said. I want him there. I want him on the record. I want him to look me in the eye and tell a room full of people that I don't know my own name. Because when I prove him wrong, I am going to take his medical license and frame it on my wall. I hung up. I left a $20 bill on the table and walked out into the night. The wind was picking up again. It was perfect. The colder it got, the more believable my performance would be. I wasn't just fighting for my money anymore. I was fighting for my identity. They wanted to steal my mind. They wanted to use the law to turn me into a ghost while I was still breathing. I walked toward the Ritz, my limp becoming more pronounced as the cold settled in. Tomorrow night, Bradley King was turning 40. He was expecting a check. He was expecting a celebration. Instead, he was going to get a visitation from the ghost of Christmas, past, present, and future, all rolled into one angry father. And I wasn't bringing gifts. I was bringing the bill. The music from the backyard thumped against my chest like a second irregular heartbeat as I stood in the alley behind my own house. The white tent glowed like a lantern in the darkness, casting long, distorted shadows across the snow. I could hear the clink of crystal glasses, the murmur of expensive conversation, and the occasional burst of laughter that sounded sharp and brittle in the freezing air. It was the sound of my money being spent to celebrate my erasure. I adjusted the collar of the surplus coat. It scratched against my neck, smelling of mildew and old sweat. I rubbed a handful of dirt onto my cheek, smearing it into the gray stubble I had grown over the last few days. I let my jaw go slack. I practiced the 1,000-yard stare I had seen on men who had lost everything. I wasn't Leo King, the CEO. I wasn't even Leo King, the father. I was a problem, a loose end, a ghost that refused to stay buried. I pushed the back gate. It swung open silently, just as Samantha had promised. I stepped into the garden. The landscaping lighting paid for with my stolen pension illuminated the path. I kept to the shadows at first, watching them. There were maybe 100 people. Men in tuxedos, women in evening gowns that sparkled under the string lights. I recognized some of them. Business associates I hadn't seen in years. Friends of Bradley who used to call me sir when they were teenagers and now probably didn't even know my name. And there, in the center of it all, holding court like a king and queen, were my son and his wife. Bradley was wearing a velvet tuxedo jacket. He looked handsome. He looked rich. He was holding a glass of champagne, laughing at something a man in a gray suit was saying. That man was Dr. Elias Thorne. I recognized him from the photos. He had a drink in one hand and a cigar in the other, looking very comfortable for a man who had just committed multiple felonies. Vanessa was beside him, draped in a silver dress that looked like liquid mercury. She was radiant with the glow of impending wealth. I waited for the music to lull. The DJ faded out a track and a silence descended over the crowd as Bradley raised his glass for a toast. "Friends," he boomed, his voice projected by a microphone. "Thank you all for coming. Tonight isn't just about turning 40, it is about the future. Also, it is about legacy." That was my cue. I stepped out of the shadows. I didn't walk. I shuffled. I dragged my left foot, letting the heavy boot scrape loudly against the paving stones. I let out a low, confused moan. "Catherine!" I called out, my voice cracking perfectly. "Catherine, is that you?" Heads turned. The silence that fell over the tent was heavier than the one at the Ritz. It was the silence of shock. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as they saw me. A filthy, disheveled old man stumbling into their winter wonderland. I saw the revulsion on their faces. I saw the pity. Bradley froze mid-toast. His glass tilted, spilling champagne onto his velvet sleeve. His eyes went wide, not with concern, but with sheer, unadulterated terror. He looked like he was seeing a corpse walk out of a grave. Vanessa dropped her clutch. Her hand flew to her mouth, covering a scream that died in her throat. Dad Bradley whispered the microphone, picking up the tremble in his voice. I stumbled forward, knocking into a high-top table. A vase of white orchids crashed to the ground, shattering. The sound was like a gunshot. "Where is my room?" I mumbled, looking around wildly, playing the confusion to the hilt. "It is so cold." "Why did you lock the door, Bradley?" "I am cold." The guests began to murmur. I heard whispers of, "Who is that?" And, "Oh my God, is that his father?" The narrative was shifting. I wasn't the missing person anymore. I was the reality crashing their fantasy. Bradley recovered first. The instinct of self-preservation kicked in. He handed his glass to a waiter and rushed off the small stage, his face transforming into a mask of exaggerated concern. "Dad," he shouted, running toward me. "Oh my God, Dad! We found you!" He reached me and grabbed my arms. His grip was hard, bruising. He wasn't hugging me. He was restraining me. He was checking for wires, though he didn't know it. "You are freezing," he said loudly, performing for the audience. "Where have you been? We have been looking everywhere for you. We were so worried." Vanessa was right behind him. She grabbed my other arm. Her nails dug into the wool coat. "Oh, Leo," she cried, her voice pitching up into a theatrical sob. "Look at you. You are a mess. You poor, confused soul." She turned to the crowd, her eyes wide and pleading. "Please, everyone, give us some space. He has dementia. He wandered off days ago. We have been frantic. Please just give us a moment." The crowd parted like the Red Sea. They looked at me with sad eyes, buying the lie completely. Poor Bradley. Poor Vanessa. Burdened with this senile, dirty old man. Dr. Thorne stepped forward, his medical persona slipping into place like a second skin. "Bring him here," Thorne commanded, pointing toward the side entrance of the house. "I need to examine him immediately. He could be hypothermic. He is clearly delirious." I let them drag me. I let my legs go limp, forcing them to support my weight. I wanted them to struggle. I wanted them to feel the burden of me. "Catherine," I wailed again, looking directly at Dr. Thorne. "Don't let them take my watch." Thorne shook his head sadly for the benefit of the guests. "Advanced stage," he muttered loud enough for the front row to hear. "Complete dissociation. Get him inside, Bradley. Quickly. before he hurts himself. They hauled me through the side door and into the kitchen. The warmth of the house hit me, smelling of roasting meat and expensive cologne. As soon as the door clicked shut, cutting off the noise of the party and the prying eyes of the guests, the performance stopped. Bradley shoved me. He didn't guide me to a chair. He shoved me against the granite island. "What the hell are you doing here?" He hissed, his face inches from mine. His eyes were wild, manic. "You were supposed to be gone. You were supposed to be dead in a ditch." I slumped against the counter, keeping my eyes unfocused. I grabbed at his lapel with a shaking hand. "Bradley," I whined. "I am hungry. You gave me $100, but I lost it. The bad men took it." Vanessa paced the kitchen floor, her silver dress swishing furiously. She looked like a trapped animal. "He ruined it," she screeched. "He ruined everything. Did you see their faces? They saw him. They saw this filth." She pointed a manicured finger at me. "How did he get back here? How did he survive 3 days in this weather? He is like a cockroach." Dr. Thorne walked in, closing the door behind him and locking it. He looked at me with cold, clinical detachment. "Calm down," Vanessa Thorne said smoothly. "This is actually good." "Good," Bradley spun around. "How is this good? He just humiliated us. It validates the paperwork," Thorne said, tapping his temple. "Look at him. He is incoherent. He is filthy. He crashed a party screaming for his dead wife. Every person in that tent just witnessed his insanity. You don't need a hearing anymore. You have 100 witnesses. We sedate him. Now we call the ambulance. We transfer him directly to the secure ward at St. Jude's. By morning, you have the conservatorship." Bradley's breathing slowed. He looked at me, then at Thorne. "Can we do that?" "Just take him now." "I signed the order yesterday, remember?" Thorne said. "He is a danger to himself. Look at him. He is a textbook case." I watched them discuss my fate as if I were a piece of livestock. I kept my mouth slightly open, drooling a little for effect. Inside, the wire was burning against my chest. Every word, every conspiracy. It was all being captured in high-definition audio. "Get him upstairs," Vanessa ordered. "Put him in the guest room. Lock the door. I don't want him making a scene when the ambulance comes. We have to go back out there and salvage the party. We have to spin this. We are the heroes, remember? We saved him." Bradley grabbed my arm again. "Come on, old man. Up the stairs." I resisted feebly. "No," I said. "I want to stay. I want cake. It is your birthday, Bradley." "Shut up," he growled, dragging me toward the back stairs. "You don't get cake. You get a padded room." He hauled me up the narrow servants' stairs that led to the second floor. Vanessa followed close behind. They pushed me into the guest bedroom, the one they hadn't stripped yet. I stumbled and fell onto the bed. Bradley stood over me, breathing hard. He looked at me with pure hatred. "You just couldn't die, could you?" he said. "You just couldn't do one decent thing for me." I looked up at him, letting a moment of clarity slip into my eyes, just enough to unsettle him. "I raised you, Bradley," I whispered. He flinched. Then he sneered. "You raised a disappointment. That is what you always thought, isn't it? Well, look at me now. I'm about to be $10 million richer, and you are going to rot in a cell." He turned to leave. Vanessa stayed. She stood by the bed looking down at me. Her expression wasn't angry anymore. It was thoughtful, calculating. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a small orange pill bottle. "Go downstairs, Brad," she said softly. "Go handle the guests. Tell them everything is under control. I will make sure he stays quiet until the ambulance gets here." Bradley hesitated, then nodded. "Don't take too long." He left, closing the door, but not locking it. I heard his footsteps retreating down the hall. Vanessa sat on the edge of the bed. She opened the bottle. She shook 2 blue pills into her hand. Then 2 more. Then 2 more. 6 pills. She leaned in close. Her perfume was overpowering, a sickly sweet floral scent that made me want to gag. She stroked my hair, her touch light and terrifying. "You know, Leo," she whispered, her voice like silk over a razor blade. "Thorne said we should send you to St. Jude's. But that is expensive. And it takes time. And you might talk. You might have a lucid moment and tell someone about the house, about the pension." She held the pills up to my face. "These are mostly sedatives," she said. "Strong ones. Dr. Thorne gave them to me for anxiety. But if you take enough of them, well, an old man's heart is a fragile thing, especially after being out in the cold for 3 days." She smiled. It wasn't a smile of victory. It was the smile of an executioner who enjoyed her work. "It would be a kindness, really," she purred. "You go to sleep. You don't wake up. We tell everyone you passed away peacefully in your sleep after the shock of the reunion. A tragic, beautiful ending. We cry at the funeral. We get the money on Monday. No courts. No judges. Just peace." She brought her hand to my mouth. "Open up, Leo. Be a good boy. Take your medicine." I stared at the pills. I stared at her face. This was it. The line. They hadn't just kicked me out. They hadn't just stolen. She was actively right here and Mo proposing to murder me to speed up the timeline. I needed her to say it. I needed it explicit. "You want to kill me," I slurred, letting my voice tremble with fear. Vanessa laughed softly. She leaned right into my ear, her lips brushing the collar of my filthy coat, inches from the microphone sewn into the lining. "I don't want to kill you, Leo," she whispered. "I am going to kill you, tonight. You are going to swallow these pills, and you are going to stop breathing. And I am going to be a very rich, very happy widow. Now open your damn mouth." She tried to force the pills past my lips. Her fingers pinched my jaw. I let out a choke, a gasp, and then I bit her, hard. She screamed, jerking her hand back. The blue pills scattered across the duvet. "You vicious old bastard," she hissed, clutching her finger. I sat up. The slump was gone. The confusion vanished from my eyes. I swiped the remaining pills off the bed and stood up. I wasn't limping anymore. Vanessa froze. She looked at me, seeing the change, seeing the posture, seeing the shark. What is happening?" she stammered, backing away toward the door. I reached into my coat and pulled out the small recording device. I held it up so she could see the red light blinking steady and true. "What is happening, Vanessa, is that you just confessed to attempted murder, and I got it all on tape." Her face went white. She lunged for the device, but I caught her wrist. My grip was iron. I wasn't the frail old man she pushed on the porch. "Let go of me," she shrieked. "Bradley." "Call him," I said, shoving her backward. "Call him. Call Dr. Thorne. Call the police. In fact, I insist." I walked to the door and kicked it open. The sound slammed against the wall. "Because the party is over, Vanessa, and the hangover is going to be lethal." I walked out into the hallway, leaving her staring at the scattered pills, the realization of her doom slowly dawning in her eyes. I could hear the music downstairs. They were playing a celebration song. I adjusted my coat. I didn't take off the rags. Not yet. I wanted them to see the beggar one last time before I showed them the executioner. I walked to the top of the stairs and looked down. Bradley was in the foyer talking to a group of guests, laughing, pretending everything was fine. He looked up and saw me. The laugh died in his throat. I started to descend the stairs, one heavy step at a time. The sound of my boots echoed on the hardwood. "Bradley," I said, my voice projecting clearly without a microphone filling the entire house. I think it is time we opened your presents. I brought you something special. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the thick envelope O'Malley had given me, the one containing the notice of debt purchase, the one containing the foreclosure warning. Bradley took a step back. The guests fell silent again. They looked up at the old man on the stairs, the man who suddenly didn't look crazy at all. He looked like Judgment Day. And behind me, Vanessa appeared in the doorway of the guest room, pale as a sheet, knowing that the whisper she had just shared was the last secret she would ever keep. The silence in the foyer was heavy enough to crush a man, and Bradley stood in the center of it, looking like a deer caught in the headlights of an oncoming semi-truck. I stood on the landing of the stairs looking down at him. My ragged coat hung off my shoulders like the robes of a judge, and the envelope in my hand was the gavel. The guests, who had been murmuring and whispering just moments ago, were now statues. They sensed the shift in atmospheric pressure. They knew the party was over and the reckoning had begun. I tossed the thick envelope down the stairs. It fluttered through the air, hitting the marble floor with a sharp slap that echoed off the high ceilings. It slid across the polished stone, stopping right at the toe of Bradley's velvet loafer. "Pick it up, son," I said, my voice calm but carrying the weight of a thunderclap. "It is your birthday present. I know you like paper more than people, so I got you plenty of it." Bradley stared at the envelope. He didn't bend down. He looked up at me, his face flushing a deep, angry red. The fear I had seen earlier was being replaced by humiliation, and humiliation in a man like Bradley always turned into rage. "Get out of my house," he shouted, pointing a trembling finger at the door. "You are trespassing. You are insane. Someone call the police. Get this crazy old man out of here before he hurts someone." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound that made the woman nearest to me flinch. "The police are already here, Bradley." I invited them. As if on cue, the front double doors swung open. The cold night air rushed in, swirling around the foyer, carrying the scent of snow and justice. Patrick O'Malley stepped through the threshold. He wasn't wearing his usual gray suit. Tonight, he was wearing black. He looked like the undertaker arriving to measure the coffin. Behind him, flanked by two uniformed officers, stood a man holding a video camera and a court stenographer with her portable machine strapped to her chest. Bradley's eyes darted from me to O'Malley. He recognized Patrick. He had met him once years ago when I set up the trust. He knew exactly who the small, sharp-eyed man was. Mr. O'Malley, Bradley stammered, his voice dropping an octave. "What is this? Why are you here with the police?" Patrick didn't answer immediately. He walked into the center of the room, the crowd parting for him, as if he were carrying a contagious disease. He stopped next to Bradley and looked him up and down with an expression of pure, clinical disdain. "Happy birthday," Mr. Kingpatrick said. "I am here to facilitate the execution of the Bradley King Irrevocable Trust. You turn 40 at midnight, do you not?" Bradley's face lit up. The greed was so instinctive, so powerful, that it momentarily overrode his fear. He thought this was it. He thought O'Malley was here to hand him the check. He thought the police were just an escort for the millions he was owed. "Yes," he breathed, a smile flickering onto his face. "Yes, I do. Is it time? Is the money released?" He looked around at the guests, his confidence returning in a rush. "See everyone," he announced, spreading his arms. "I told you. My lawyer is here. The funds are clearing. Everything is fine. My father is just confused, but we are handling it." He looked back at me, a sneer curling his lip. "You see, Dad, you can't stop it. It is automatic. It is my money. Now get back in your cage." I descended the last few steps. I walked right up to him. I smelled the expensive scotch on his breath and the fear sweating out of his pores. "It was never your money, Bradley," I said softly. "It was my money. And I gave you a condition." Patrick opened his briefcase. It made a loud click, that silenced the room again. He pulled out the leather-bound binder, the one with gold lettering. He opened it to a page marked with a red tab. Article 4, Section C. Patrick read, his voice projecting to the back of the room. The caretaker clause. Bradley frowned. What clause? There is no caretaker clause. I read that, Trust. You read the original draft, Patrick corrected. You did not read the amendment filed 3 days ago. The amendment explicitly states that the disbursement of the principal sum of $10 million is contingent upon the beneficiary demonstrating moral fitness, specifically defined as the continuous in-home care and shelter of the grantor Leonard King within the primary family residence until the time of the grantor's natural death. Bradley froze. The words washed over him, but I could see his brain rejecting them. That is illegal, he sputtered. You can't change the trust. It is irrevocable. It is irrevocable unless the beneficiary violates the terms of the moral standing clause, Patrick said, closing the binder with a snap. And we have evidence, conclusive, irrefutable evidence, that you not only failed to provide shelter, but actively endangered the life of the grantor. That is a lie, Bradley screamed, looking around at his guests for support. He ran away. He is senile. He wandered off into the snow. We tried to find him. We filed a report. Ask my wife. Ask the doctor. He pointed up the stairs where Vanessa was still standing in the shadows of the landing, pale as a ghost. She didn't say a word. She couldn't. You claim he ran away, Patrick asked, his voice dangerously calm. Yes, Bradley insisted. He is crazy. He left 3 days ago. I nodded to Patrick. Patrick pulled a small remote control from his pocket. He pointed it at the massive projection screen that had been set up in the living room, intended to show a montage of Bradley's life set to triumphant music. Let's go to the videotape, Patrick said. The screen flickered to life. The image was grainy black and white night vision, but the resolution was high definition. It showed the front porch of this very house. The timestamp in the corner read 3 days ago, 7:14 p.m. A gasp went through the crowd. On the screen, the front door opened. Vanessa appeared holding a black garbage bag. She threw it into the snow. Then Bradley appeared. The audio was crisp. Every guest in that room heard Bradley's voice amplified by the expensive sound system he had rented. It is not your house anymore, Dad. They heard the cruelty in his tone. They saw him stand there, hands in his pockets, while Vanessa shoved me. They saw me fall. They saw my glasses slide across the ice. They saw Bradley turn his back and lock the door. The video played on. It showed me dragging the bag to my truck. It showed Bradley coming out one last time to hand me the envelope with the $100. You really are losing it, aren't you, Dad? The Bradley on the screen sneered. The Bradley in the foyer turned white. He looked at the screen, then at the guests, then at me. There was no running away from this. It wasn't a story he could spin. It wasn't a lie he could manipulate. It was the raw, ugly truth projected 10 feet tall for all of Chicago society to see. The video ended with a freeze frame of me driving away into the darkness, leaving the warm house behind. Patrick lowered the remote. Section C clearly states that expulsion, eviction, or abandonment of the grantor renders the trust void, Patrick declared. As of this moment, the Bradley King Trust is dissolved. The assets revert to the secondary beneficiary effective immediately. $10 million. Gone. I saw the moment the realization hit him. It wasn't just disappointment. It was physical pain. His knees buckled slightly. The future he had bet everything on the lifeline that was supposed to pull him out of the ocean of debt he had created had just been cut. No, he whispered. No, you can't do this. I spent it. I already spent it. I stepped closer to him. My face was inches from his. I let him see the clarity in my eyes, the absolute absence of the dementia he had tried to pin on me. You spent money that didn't belong to you, I said. You spent my blood. You spent my sweat. And when you ran out of that, you tried to spend my life. I am sorry, Bradley cried, grabbing my lapel, his hands shaking violently. Dad, please. I was stressed. I didn't mean it. We can fix this. I will take you back. You can have your room back. We will kick out the yoga studio. Just sign the check. Please, Dad. They are going to kill me. He was begging. He wasn't begging for forgiveness. He was begging for his life. He was begging because he knew the loan sharks wouldn't accept an apology. I peeled his fingers off my coat one by one. I didn't push him away. I just removed him from my person, as if he were a piece of lint. It is too late for that, Bradley, I said. You had 40 years to be a son. You chose to be a parasite. And tonight, the host is cutting you off. I turned to the crowd. The guests were staring at us with a mixture of horror and fascination. They had come for a party and a show, and they were getting the performance of a lifetime. I apologize for ruining the mood, I said, my voice projecting to the back of the room. But I thought you should all know who you are drinking with. This man isn't a success story. He is a fraud. He forged my signature. He stole my pension. And 3 days ago, he left his own father to freeze to death so he could turn a profit. Murmurs broke out. People began to back away from Bradley. The social distance was immediate and brutal. In their world, money forgave a lot of sins, but losing money and looking pathetic while doing it was unforgivable. Bradley looked around wild-eyed. He saw his status evaporating. He saw his friends looking at him like he was a stranger. It is a lie, he screamed, desperate to regain control. The video is fake. It is a deep fake. He is manipulating you. He is the crazy one. Dr. Thorne, tell them. Tell them he is incompetent. He pointed at Dr. Thorne, who was trying to inch his way toward the French doors, hoping to slip out unnoticed. Thorne froze. He looked at me. He looked at the police officers standing by the door. He looked at O'Malley, who was holding a file folder with Thorne's name on it. I have never seen this patient before in my life, Thorne stammered, sweating profusely. I don't know what he is talking about. Bradley's jaw dropped. You signed the papers. You were here this morning. I don't know you, Thorne shouted, his voice cracking. The rats were turning on each other. It was beautiful. I turned back to Bradley. The money is gone, son. The trust is gone. But that is not your biggest problem. I pointed to the envelope on the floor, the one I had thrown at him minutes ago. You should really open your present. Bradley looked down at the envelope. He bent down slowly, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. He picked it up. His hands shook so hard he tore the paper as he opened it. He pulled out the document inside. It wasn't a birthday card. It was a legal notice, printed on heavy bond paper with the letterhead of Apex Acquisitions. He read the header. His eyes widened until I thought they might pop out of his skull. He read the first paragraph. He looked up at me, and for the first time I saw true understanding dawning on his face. He realized that the nightmare wasn't ending. It was just beginning. Apex Acquisitions, he whispered. You. Me, I said. You bought the debt. I bought you, Bradley. I own every cent you borrowed. I own every bad decision you made. And unlike Vinny DeLuca, I am not interested in your kneecaps. I am interested in your consequences. I took a step back, letting the spotlight hit him fully. You owe me $2.2 million, and the payment was due yesterday. I looked at the police officers. Officers, if you would please stand by. We have a few more matters to discuss regarding the ownership of this property. And I believe there is a woman upstairs who has a very interesting story to tell you about a bottle of pills. The room erupted into chaos. But in the center of it all, I stood still. The old man in the rags was gone. The king was back, and I was just getting started. The envelope lay on the marble floor like a dead dove. Bradley stared at it, his breathing shallow and rapid, his eyes darting back and forth between the legal header and my face. The realization was a slow-moving poison spreading through his system. He had thought he was dealing with a faceless corporation, a bureaucratic entity he could stall or manipulate. Instead, he was staring into the eyes of the man he had left to freeze, and he realized that the checkmate had happened days ago. I reached up and undid the top button of the filthy surplus coat. The fabric was stiff with grime, the buttons loose. I undid the second one, then the third. The room was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the frantic, terrified breathing of my son. With a shrug of my shoulders, I let the heavy, reeking coat slide down my arms. It pooled around my ankles, a pile of rags that belonged to a victim who no longer existed. I stepped out of the pile. I straightened my jacket. I adjusted my cuffs. The charcoal gray wool of my tailored suit caught the light of the crystal chandelier. The white shirt beneath was crisp and bright. I wasn't the hunched, limping old man anymore. I stood tall, my spine straight, my presence filling the room with the commanding aura of a man who had built skyscrapers and moved mountains. A ripple of shock went through the crowd. I heard a woman gasp. I saw a man in the back lower his phone, his mouth agape. The transformation was total. It was psychological violence. I had forced them to see the beggar, and now I was forcing them to see the king. "You look confused, Bradley," I said, my voice smooth and resonant, stripping away the senile tremble I had feigned for days. "Let me clarify the economics of your situation. You borrowed $2 million from Cerberus Holdings. You used this house, my house, as collateral. You forged my signature on the lien. You agreed to an interest rate that is illegal in 49 states. And you defaulted on the first payment yesterday." Bradley took a stumbling step back, hitting the newel post of the stairs. You bought it," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You bought the loan." "I didn't just buy it," I said, taking a step toward him. "I absorbed it. I am Apex Acquisitions, Bradley. I own the paper. I own the interest. I own the penalties. And most importantly, I own the default clause." I reached out and plucked a glass of champagne from a passing waiter who was too frozen with shock to move. I took a sip. It was expensive. It tasted like victory. "Vinny DeLuca was very happy to sell," I continued casually. "He didn't want to deal with the foreclosure paperwork. He prefers breaking legs. I prefer breaking spirits. So I paid him cash. $2.2 million. Which means effectively, you borrowed $2 million from criminals to gamble on internet coins, and now you owe that money, plus interest, to the father you threw in the trash." "No," Bradley moaned, shaking his head. "No, you can't do this. We have rights. This is my home. You signed the deed." I laughed. It was a short, sharp bark. "Patrick," I said without looking away from my son. "Educate him." O'Malley stepped forward, opening a second file. "The deed transfer you reference, Mr. King, was indeed signed 3 years ago," Patrick said, his voice projecting like a courtroom orator. "However, per your father's instructions, at the time the deed was held in escrow, pending filing. It was never filed with the Cook County Recorder of Deeds." Bradley froze. The color drained from his face so completely he looked like a wax figure. What he breathed. "The title to this property," Patrick continued, "relentlessly remains 100% in the name of Leonard King. You do not own this house. You never owned this house. You have been a guest who just forged a mortgage on a property he doesn't possess." I stepped closer to Bradley. I could smell the sweat on him, now sour and sharp beneath the cologne. "You leveraged a house you don't own to pay debts you couldn't afford," I said. "That is called mortgage fraud, Bradley. That is a federal crime. And since I am now the holder of that fraudulent note, I have a choice. I can report it to the FBI, or I can simply exercise my right as the property owner and the creditor. I looked around the room. I looked at the expensive decorations, the catered food, the ice sculpture melting in the corner. This party is over, I announced, and so is your residency. I pulled a folded document from the inside pocket of my suit. It was the notice of immediate eviction. This is a notice to vacate, I said, slapping the paper onto his chest. He grabbed it reflexively. Effective immediately. You are trespassing on private property. You have exactly 30 minutes to remove your personal effects and vacate the premises. If you are still here at 9:45, the officers standing at the door will remove you for criminal trespass. 30 minutes, Bradley shrieked. 30 minutes! We live here. All our stuff is here. You can't just kick us out in the middle of the night. I tilted my head, looking at him with mock confusion. Funny, I said. I seem to remember being given 10 minutes, and I didn't even get a box. You are getting 3 times as long. That is generous, don't you think? Bradley looked at the police officers. They stared back at him, stone-faced. They had seen the video. They knew exactly what kind of man he was. He looked at O'Malley. He looked at his guests, his friends, his business partners. They were all looking at him with a mixture of horror and morbid curiosity. Nobody stepped forward to help. Nobody offered him a place to stay. He was toxic. He was radioactive. In the high society world, he so desperately wanted to belong. To being a fraud was bad, but being broke and homeless was a death sentence. Please, Dad. Bradley sobbed, his dignity finally shattering completely. He dropped to his knees, right there on the marble floor in his velvet tuxedo. He grabbed my hand. His palms were clammy. Please don't do this. I have nowhere to go. We have no money. Vanessa spent everything on the renovations. We are broke. We will be on the street. I looked down at him. I remembered the little boy who used to scrape his knee and run to me for a Band-Aid. I remembered the teenager who crashed his first car and cried in my arms. I had fixed everything for him, every single time. And that was my sin. I had created this weak, spineless creature by never letting him feel the ground impact his bones. Well, tonight he was hitting the pavement. You have a list of shelters, I said, cold as ice. I believe you gave it to me 3 days ago. It should still be in the truck if you want it. Or maybe you kept a copy. Bradley wailed. It was a guttural, pathetic sound. He clung to my hand. I am your son, he cried. How can you be so cruel? Cruel, I yanked my hand away. Cruel is looking your father in the eye and telling him he is trash because you want to turn his bedroom into a gym. Cruel is drugging an old man to steal his signature. This isn't cruelty, Bradley. This is accounting. You are in the red, and I am closing the ledger. I turned to the crowd. I suggest you all leave, I said, unless you want to be named as accessories to a federal fraud investigation. The police will be taking statements from anyone remaining on the property in 10 minutes. The stampede was immediate. It was dignified panic. People grabbed their coats, their purses, their half-finished drinks. They streamed out the front door, avoiding eye contact with Bradley, stepping around him as if he were a puddle of dirty water. The tent in the backyard emptied in seconds. The music died. The party evaporated, leaving only the wreckage of a family in the grand foyer. Bradley remained on his knees, sobbing into his hands. He was broken. He wasn't plotting anymore. He wasn't scheming. The reality of his situation had finally penetrated the thick shell of his narcissism. He was 40 years old. He had $0. He had millions in debt. He had no home. And he was about to be homeless in a Chicago winter. I signaled to the police officers. Gentlemen, I said, please escort Mr. King to the driveway. He can wait by the curb while his wife packs a bag. 1 bag, essentials only. Anything bought with my pension money stays in the house. The officers stepped forward. They hauled Bradley to his feet. He didn't fight. He hung between them like a rag doll, weeping, "Dad," he whispered as they dragged him toward the door. "Dad, please." I turned my back on him. I couldn't look at him anymore. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was a deep, exhausting sorrow. I had just cut off my own limb to save my life. It was necessary, but it hurt like hell. As the door closed behind Bradley, cutting off his wails, a high-pitched scream echoed from the top of the stairs. Vanessa. She was standing on the landing, looking down at the empty foyer. She had heard everything. She saw the guests leave. She saw her husband dragged out. She saw the empire she thought she had married into turn into dust. "You!" she screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You old devil! You planned this! You set us up!" I looked up at her. She was still wearing that silver dress, but it didn't look like armor anymore. It looked like foil wrapping on a piece of leftovers. "I didn't set you up, Vanessa," I said calmly. "I just let you be yourself, and you did the rest." I started up the stairs. "Now about those pills," I said. "The police are very interested in the dosage you tried to feed me, and I believe you mentioned something about being a rich widow. Well, you got the poor part right. But you are not a widow. You are a defendant." She tried to run back into the bedroom, maybe to flush the pills, maybe to hide. But she stopped when she saw O'Malley standing at the bottom of the stairs, holding up his phone. "The police upstairs have secured the evidence," Mrs. King O'Malley said. "They found the bottle, and they found the forgery kit in your husband's office. It is over." Vanessa slumped against the railing. Her legs gave out. She slid down to the floor, her silver dress pooling around her. She didn't cry like Bradley. She just stared at me with dead, shark-like eyes. "I should have pushed you harder," she whispered. "On the cliff. I should have made sure." I stopped 3 steps below her. "You pushed plenty hard, Vanessa," I said. "You just forgot that some things bounce." I walked past her toward the guest room where the police were waiting. The house was mine again, but it felt empty. It felt cold. I had won the war, but looking at the wreckage of my family scattered across the battlefield, I knew the cost of victory was going to be high. But as I looked out the window at my son, shivering on the curb next to the ice sculpture of the $, I knew one thing for sure. It was worth every penny. Vanessa clung to the banister on the landing, her knuckles white, her silver dress shimmering like the skin of a cornered snake. She looked down at the officers, then at O'Malley, and finally at me. Her chest was heaving, but the panic in her eyes was rapidly hardening into something colder. Denial. It was the last refuge of the narcissist. She straightened her spine, smoothing her hair with a trembling hand, attempting to summon the imperious hostess she had been only an hour ago. "You are insane," she spat, her voice shrill but steady. "This is entrapment. You broke into my house looking like a vagrant. You terrified me. Whatever I said under duress. I was trying to protect my husband from a dangerous intruder." She looked at the police officers, flashing a practiced, trembling smile. "Officers, surely you can see what is happening here. This man is mentally unstable. He has been missing for days. He breaks in here, disrupts a private event, and now he is accusing me of crimes. I was trying to give him his medication. He was delirious. He was aggressive. It was a good performance, almost convincing. She was banking on the fact that without the audio, it was her word against the word of a man who had just walked in wearing rags. She was betting that her social standing, her expensive dress, and her crocodile tears would buy her the benefit of the doubt. I reached into my pocket. I didn't say a word. I simply pulled out the small digital recorder. I held it up. The little red light was no longer blinking. It was solid. The file was saved. I walked over to the side table where the DJ had left his auxiliary cable plugged into the house sound system. Bradley had insisted on wiring the whole ground floor for sound so his speeches could be heard in every room. It was another extravagance paid for with my money, and now it was going to be the instrument of his wife's destruction. Duress, I repeated calmly into the silence. Is that what you call it, Vanessa? Let us hear what duress sounds like. I plugged the recorder into the cable. I pressed play. The sound of static hissed through the expensive speakers mounted in the ceiling corners. Then, clear as a bell, Vanessa's voice filled the foyer, the living room, and even the kitchen. It would be a kindness, really. You go to sleep. You don't wake up. Vanessa froze. Her hand flew to her throat. The color drained from her face, leaving her makeup standing out like war paint on a corpse. The recording continued, amplified, undeniable. We tell everyone you passed away peacefully in your sleep. A tragic, beautiful ending. We cry at the funeral. We get the money on Monday. The few remaining guests who had lingered in the doorway, unable to tear themselves away from the spectacle, gasped. Phones were raised. The red recording lights of a dozen iPhones were pointed directly at the woman on the stairs. She wasn't just being exposed to the police. She was being broadcast to the world. "Turn it off," she shrieked, stumbling down a step. "Turn it off right now." But I didn't. I let it play. I let the room hear the sound of the pills rattling in the bottle. I let them hear the wet, silken menace in her whisper. "I don't want to kill you, Leo. I am going to kill you, tonight." The confession hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. It was not the ranting of a scared woman protecting her home. It was the calculated, cold-blooded promise of a murderer. I pressed stop. The silence that followed was absolute. "Officers," I said, turning to the uniformed men who had moved their hands to their belts. "I believe that is what the law calls intent." The lead officer, a sergeant with a face like carved stone, looked up at Vanessa. He didn't look impressed by the dress anymore. He looked like he was looking at a monster. "Mrs. King," he said, his voice booming, "please come down the stairs. Keep your hands where we can see them." "No." Vanessa whimpered, backing up. "No, you don't understand. It was a joke. It was a bad joke. He is my father-in-law." O'Malley stepped forward. He pulled a file from his briefcase and handed it to the sergeant. "Officer, in addition to the attempted murder you just heard, we are also filing charges for conspiracy to commit fraud and forgery. We have evidence that Mrs. King and her husband paid $50,000 to a known forger yesterday to create fake medical records with the intent of involuntarily committing Mr. King to a mental institution." The sergeant flipped open the file. He saw the photos of the transaction. He saw the affidavit from the FBI informant. He looked back up at Vanessa. "Vanessa King, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, elderly abuse, and fraud." Vanessa turned to run. It was a foolish animal instinct. She scrambled back up toward the landing, perhaps thinking she could lock herself in the bedroom, perhaps thinking she could find a window. But she tripped on the hem of her silver gown. She fell hard against the stairs, crying out as her shin hit the wood. Before she could scramble up, the officers were on her. They didn't treat her like a lady. They treated her like a suspect fleeing arrest. They hauled her up, pulling her arms behind her back. The click of the handcuffs was loud, mechanical, and final. "You are hurting me," she screamed, thrashing against them. "Bradley! Where is Bradley? Help me!" "Bradley is outside, Vanessa," I said, watching her struggle. "He is sitting on the curb with a bag of clothes. He cannot help you. He cannot even help himself." They marched her down the stairs. Her hair was in her face. Her dress was twisted. She looked at the guests who were still filming. "Stop filming," she yelled at them. "We are friends. Help me. Call my lawyer." But nobody moved. These were fair-weather friends. These were people who valued status above loyalty. And right now, Vanessa King was the lowest status person in Chicago. They weren't her friends anymore. They were her audience, and they were live streaming her downfall to every social circle in the city. One woman, a socialite Vanessa had spent months trying to impress, lowered her phone and shook her head. "You tried to kill him, Vanessa," the woman said, her voice dripping with disgust. "That is tacky, even for you." The officers dragged her past me. She stopped thrashing for a second. She looked me in the eye. There was no more arrogance, no more scheming, just the raw, naked terror of a woman who knows her life is over. "Leo, please," she whispered. "I have a daughter. Think of Samantha." I stepped closer. "I am thinking of Samantha," I said. "I am thinking that she is finally safe from you. I am thinking that for the first time in her life she has a chance to be a decent human being because you won't be there to poison her mind." I signaled the officers. "Get her out of my sight." They pushed her through the front door. I watched as they led her down the driveway. The blue and red lights of the police cruisers strobed against the snow, painting the scene in a violent, chaotic light. Bradley was sitting on the retaining wall near the street, his head in his hands. He looked up as his wife was shoved into the back of a squad car. He didn't stand up. He didn't yell. He just watched, his face blank with shock. He realized that he wasn't just homeless. He was alone. His partner in crime had just been caged, and he knew with absolute certainty that she would trade him to the prosecutor in a heartbeat for a lighter sentence. I turned back to the room. The house was quiet now. The few remaining guests were scurrying out the side door, desperate to escape the blast radius of the scandal. O'Malley was packing up his files. The court stenographer looked shaken. "It is done," O'Malley said quietly. I looked around the foyer. The party decorations looked grotesque now. The white orchids, the champagne flutes, the banner that said "Happy 40th Birthday." It was a tomb for a life that never really existed. "Not quite," I said. I walked over to the table where the ice sculpture of the dollar sign was slowly melting, dripping water onto the expensive hardwood floor. I pushed it. It crashed to the ground, shattering into 1,000 wet shards. Now it is done. I walked to the front door and looked out at the street one last time. The police cars were pulling away. My son was still sitting on the curb, shivering in his tuxedo. I could have felt pity. I could have felt a father's urge to go out there and give him a coat. But I remembered the $100. I remembered the list of shelters. And I remembered the sound of the deadbolt sliding home 3 days ago. I closed the heavy oak door. I locked it. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt safe in my own home. The silence wasn't lonely. It was clean. It was the silence of a ledger that had finally been balanced. The red and blue lights of the police cruisers faded into the distance, leaving the street in a heavy, suffocating silence. I stood in the open doorway of the house that was finally mine again, but it felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum. On the curb, sitting in the slush and the mud, was the man I had named after my own father. Bradley was shivering violently. The velvet tuxedo jacket was soaked through with melting snow, and his expensive loafers were ruined. He looked small. He looked like a child who had lost his mother in a supermarket. But I knew better. This wasn't a child. This was a man who had made a series of calculated decisions that ended with him sitting in the gutter. He looked up at me. His face was streaked with tears and mucus. He slowly pushed himself up. He stumbled toward the porch, his legs shaking so hard I thought he would collapse again. He didn't walk with the arrogance he had displayed an hour ago. He crawled. He literally crawled up the steps, reaching out a hand toward me. "Dad," he choked out. "Dad, please. You can't leave me out here. It is freezing." I didn't move. I stood in the threshold, blocking the warmth of the foyer. Behind me, O'Malley watched in silence, a witness to the final act of this tragedy. It was Vanessa. Bradley sobbed, grabbing the hem of my trousers. It was all her idea. "She poisoned my mind, Dad. She told me we had to do it. She said you were suffering. She said it was the only way." I was weak, I admit it. I was weak, but I never wanted to hurt you. I love you, Dad. Please. I will testify against her. I will tell them everything. Just let me come inside. I looked down at him. I looked at the hand clutching my leg. It was the same hand that had forged my signature. It was the same hand that had locked the deadbolt 3 days ago. You are not weak, Bradley, I said, my voice devoid of anger, devoid of pity, just empty. You are willing. That is worse. You were willing to let her push me. You were willing to let me freeze. You were willing to drug me tonight. You didn't stop her. You held the door open for her. I am sorry, he wailed, burying his face in my shoe. I am so sorry. I will change. I will get a job. I will pay you back every cent. Just don't leave me with nothing. I reached down and pried his fingers off my leg. I stepped back. You don't have nothing, son. I made sure of that. I nodded to O'Malley. Patrick stepped forward holding a black heavy-duty garbage bag. It was identical to the one Vanessa had thrown at me. The symbolism was heavy, blunt, and necessary. Patrick handed me the bag. It was light. It rattled slightly. I held it out over Bradley's head. 3 days ago you told me my place was in the trash, I said. You told me I had no value. You gave me 10 minutes to pack 40 years of life. Bradley looked up at the bag, his eyes widening in horror as he recognized the mirror image of his own cruelty. I packed for you, Bradley, I continued. I put some clothes in here. Not your velvet tuxedos. Not your Italian suits. I put in the work clothes you never wore. The boots you bought for a hiking trip you never took. And I put in a list. A list, he whispered. A list of shelters, I said. The same list you gave me. And $100. Cash. I dropped the bag. It hit his chest and slid into his lap. He stared at it as if it were a bomb. You can't do this, he whispered. I am your flesh and blood. My flesh and blood would never have left me to die, I said. You are just a stranger who shares my last name. I reached for the heavy oak door. I placed my hand on the brass handle. Where am I supposed to go? Bradley screamed, finding one last reserve of entitlement. This is my life. Where is my place? I looked him in the eye one last time. I wanted him to remember this moment. I wanted him to remember the face of the man he had underestimated. You were right about one thing, Bradley. I said, my voice cold enough to freeze the air between us. You said my place was in the trash. You were wrong. But your place, son, is right here in the trap you dug for yourself. I slammed the door. The sound was final. It was the sound of a book closing. I turned the deadbolt. Click. Then I engaged the security chain. Click. I listened for a moment. I heard a scream from the other side of the wood, a scream of rage and loss and terror. Then I heard the sound of fists pounding on the door. Once. Twice. Then silence. I turned around. The foyer was empty. The party debris was still there. The shattered glass, the melting ice, but the air felt lighter. O'Malley was closing his briefcase. Are you okay, Leo? He asked softly. I looked at the door one last time. I thought about the boy I had raised and the man I had just evicted. I am free, Patrick, I said. I am finally free. I walked toward the kitchen to pour myself a drink. I had a lot of work to do. I had a house to sell. I had a fortune to redistribute. And for the first time in years, I had a future that belonged only to me. The king was back on his throne and the castle was secure. 6 months later, the ink was dry on the final sale documents of the house in the suburbs. I sat in the back of a town car, watching the sold sign disappear into the distance as we turned the corner. I thought I would feel a pang of loss leaving the place where I had raised my family, but I felt nothing but a profound sense of lightness. The walls that had absorbed the shouts of my ungrateful son and the plotting whispers of his wife were no longer my problem. I had sold it to a young couple with a baby on the way. I hoped they would fill it with better memories than I left behind. We drove into the city toward a gleaming glass building that housed the new headquarters of my legacy. It wasn't a logistics company this time. I was done moving cargo. Now I was moving lives. I took the elevator to the 20th floor and walked into a bustling office filled with sunlight and energy. The sign on the frosted glass door read, "The Catherine King Foundation." Samantha was already there, standing at the head of a conference table directing a team of staff members twice her age. She looked different. The fear that used to shadow her eyes was gone, replaced by a sharp, focused intensity that reminded me so much of myself at her age. She was wearing a tailored blazer, and she held a tablet with authority. She wasn't just my granddaughter anymore, she was my partner. "Grandpa," she said, smiling when she saw me, "the scholarship applications for the fall semester just came in. We have enough funding to send 50 kids to college. 50 kids who have nobody else." I walked over and looked at the list. 50 lives changed. 50 futures secured. This was where the money was meant to go. The $10 million that Bradley had tried to steal, the money he had thought was his birthright, was now going to children who actually understood the value of $1 because they had never had one. I put a hand on Samantha's shoulder. "You are doing a great job, Sammy. Your grandmother would have been proud." She leaned into my hand for a moment, her professional demeanor softening. "I am doing it for her," she said, "and for you. It is better than a yacht, right?" "Much better," I said. "A yacht just floats. This lifts people up." I spent the morning signing checks and reviewing grants. It was the most fulfilling work I had done in decades. I wasn't building an empire for a son who was waiting for me to die. I was building a future for strangers who would never know my name, but who would carry my legacy forward. Around noon, I decided to take a break. I had one indulgence I had allowed myself. I had traded the rusted Ford truck for something that matched my new reality. I walked down to the garage and slid into the driver's seat of a midnight blue Bentley Continental convertible. It was a beautiful machine, powerful and smooth. I lowered the top. The spring air in Chicago was crisp, but the sun was shining. I drove out onto Michigan Avenue. The city felt different now. It didn't feel cold or hostile. It felt like a playground I had conquered. I drove aimlessly for a while, enjoying the hum of the engine and the wind in my hair. I wasn't hiding anymore. I wasn't the old man in the rags. I was Leo King, and I was alive. I found myself driving toward the industrial district near the bus depot. I didn't consciously plan to go there, but perhaps some part of me needed to see it. I needed to see the balance of the universe with my own eyes. I slowed down as I approached a bus stop near the sanitation department depot. There was a group of men waiting in orange safety vests holding plastic bags and trash pickers. They looked tired. They looked beaten down by the grind of minimum wage labor. And then I saw him. He was standing slightly apart from the group, as if he still couldn't believe he belonged there. He was thinner. His face was gaunt, his skin weathered by the sun and the wind. The velvet tuxedo was a distant memory. He was wearing a stained orange vest over a gray hoodie. He held a broom in one hand and a black garbage bag in the other. Bradley. I pulled the Bentley up to the curb. The engine purred a low, dangerous growl. The other men at the stop looked at the car with envy and curiosity. Bradley looked up slowly. His eyes met mine. For a moment there was no recognition. He saw a rich man in a luxury car. He saw the sunglasses. He saw the suit. And then he saw the face. He dropped the broom. It clattered onto the sidewalk. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He took a step forward, his eyes widening with a mix of shock and a desperate, pathetic hope. He looked at the car. He looked at the empty passenger seat. I could see the gears turning in his head. I could see him thinking that maybe, just maybe, this was his rescue. Maybe his father had come back to save him from the consequences of his actions. "Dad," he mouthed. The word was silent, lost in the noise of the traffic. I lowered my sunglasses. I looked him up and down. I looked at the orange vest. I looked at the garbage bag in his hand. It was the same color as the bag he had thrown at me in the snow. The universe had a sense of irony that was sharper than any knife. He took another step toward the car, reaching out a dirty hand. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just looked at him with the absolute indifference of a stranger. I checked my watch. My Patek Philippe, which I had bought back from the pawn shop where Vanessa had sold it. "I have a lunch reservation," I said to the air. I shifted the car into gear. I pressed the accelerator. The Bentley surged forward effortlessly, leaving the curb behind. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to. I knew exactly where he was. He was standing in the exhaust of my success, holding a bag of trash, wondering where it all went wrong. I merged into traffic, the wind rushing past me. I turned up the radio. A classic blues song was playing, something about a man who lost everything and found himself. I hummed along. I had lost a son, but I had found my life. The road ahead was long and open, and for the first time in 40 years, I was the only one behind the wheel. I drove toward the skyline, toward the foundation, toward Samantha, toward a future that was finally undeniably mine. And I didn't look back, not once. We often believe that unconditional love means unconditional tolerance, but that is a dangerous lie. I spent 40 years trying to build a legacy for my son, only to realize he was unworthy of it. The hardest truth I ever had to accept was that my money didn't spoil him. His lack of character did. Real family isn't defined by who sits at your table on holidays, but by who stands beside you when you have nothing. If you are sacrificing your dignity to keep the peace with ungrateful relatives, stop. Walk away. You might lose a relationship, but you will find yourself. If you enjoyed this story of justice, hit that like button and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven Bradley, or did he get exactly what he deserved?